Greetings everyone, welcome to the Last Year in Warframe series where I compile segments of my videos uploaded from the past year to provide you with a complete collection of information regarding the subject matter. This specific upload compiles all of the changes made to Warframe in 2020 with the exception of changes to events and operations that are no longer in the game. This was done to remove now unnecessary information and to reduce the length of the video. This video will feature video clips that showcase the changes made where applicable, but if no footage is required due to it being a back-end or statistic change, the game's patch notes will be displayed on the screen. For a recap of 2020, there will be 3 videos available on this channel, including this one, that of course being the first, which is the changes to Warframe. There will also be the additions to Warframe in 2020, and then every fix to Warframe in 2020 videos. These videos on top of those from previous years are available in the Last Year in Warframe playlist if you do want to watch them. Now, let us begin Last Year in Warframe 2020, the Change Edition. In point 9, DE removed the Pennant from Conclave. They also removed a redundant damage block stat from Saren's Toxic Lash and a crate from the extraction zone in the Grenier Shipyard tileset. They also updated the background for glyph dioramas in the market, added decorations around Samaris' targets so they were less likely to be mistaken for thralls. The Shadow now uses its clip mesh when disarmed, and they also added pickup text to the Shadow and Euphona Prime. The primed Smite Infested mod and the Zylok are now tradable. They disabled the new boss health bar on the Razorback because it was causing some issues, and the original health bar has returned. Garuda can now cue her Dread Mirror projectile charge or throw more easily after using Seeking Talons. They also added the floating state of Wisp to her melee weapon, so when you're melee, you'll still be floating. They also fixed her movement when equipped with the Shadow. In point 10, the Shadow blueprint was added to Cephalon Samaris' Lost and Found offerings, but only after players complete the quest. They also increased the range that the Mine Ospreys drop mines from, and removed decimals in the arsenal stats if damage fall-off range is 1000 or greater to fix numbers overlapping and appearing messy. In point 11, Grendel's Spectres can now use all of his abilities. Kuva thralls now have a unique marker to differentiate themselves from the Lich. They removed the slight red tint that was always displayed on the Shadow's glow, no matter the energy choice. The Warframe and Weapon tooltip in the inventory will now display an Exilus icon if said item or Warframe has one installed, and they made some micro optimizations to the minimap code. In point 12, defense waves will now complete if NPCs are downed but not dead, except for the final wave. They've removed the hit scan traces from the Imperator Vandal, as it is now a projectile weapon. They optimized server-side code for game login, and enemy class hierarchy slightly. They also improved the robustness of a script interface to try to avoid scripts breaking if you switch to your operator at the wrong time. They made some systemic optimizations to the script runtime, some micro optimizations to the UI system. They improved the error handling in the cache optimizer, updated the boss kills section in the profile stats. Hydroid, Limbo, Mesa, and Mirage now have ability videos in their arsenal screens. They increased the scan projector effects when conserving on the Orb Valis to address colorblind difficulty, optimized host migration speeds for client to be significantly faster, optimized collision on the Orokin Derelict tentacles to better match current player movement skills. They optimized muzzle flash effects on the Zundai pistol skin. They cleaned up some Sonicore light effects, tweaked Ivara Prime's prowl effect to be less prominent while moving to reduce eye strain based on feedback. They disabled the Y key triggering randomized appearance in the arsenal, and they optimized the Imperator's projectiles to improve performance and performance in a section of the Kuva Fortress. Melee heavy attacks can no longer be triggered by holding your melee key and must be triggered via the alternate fire key. DE has stated that they have no intention of making a toggle to allow both to exist. NPCs now have about a second delay before being alerted to the presence of NPCs or players exiting an invisibility state. They also removed Riven mods from the Codex mod screen. All Gas City and Sanctuary Onslaught and Elite Sanctuary Onslaught Captura scenes can now be sold. A fully charged Orvius throw will now activate its enemy suspension mechanic, and they restored the original default energy colors of the Limbo Lamina skin and Necros Akalia skin. You can now access Ivara's Levirian when viewing Ivara Prime in the Codex, and DE have updated the Warframe Crash Handler to provide clarity for what the Crash Handler is requesting of you. DE have reduced the ducat price of Necros Prime's Blueprint and Oberon Prime systems from 100 ducats to 60 due to a rarity change that occurred with a recent Prime Vault. They also tweaked the Toxic Ancient's area of effect blast effect timing so that it is now visible before the actual damage. For general changes, you can now send weapons fire through Nova's wormhole. Garuda's Dread Mirror shield has been increased slightly to help her protect her feet. Hildren's Haven ability now provides invulnerability to all damage for 3 seconds for her allies upon shields being depleted. Saren's Miasma will now only proc a single viral status on its initial hit, rather than each time Miasma applies damage due to the changes with a viral status effect. The Firestorm mod can now be equipped on all primary weapons, and the Fulmination mod can be equipped on all secondary weapons. The Codex console in the Orbiter will now show Levirian Prex cards rather than items from anywhere in the Codex, plus they also added a Levirian page to the Codex. The quest section of the Codex now orders itself by active, incomplete, and then complete. The Prophet Taker's blue shield projectile attacks cooldown has also been increased after feedback. They have made the Focus Convergence Orb marker a lighter yellow. They have removed the Exterminate Enemies stage from Sortie Spy missions. Improvements were made towards hangs that could occur when selecting Appearance in the arsenal. They've increased the frequency in which missions from the Void appear as Void Fissures. Camera shake and color correction has been removed for other players in your squad when firing the Kuva Brahma. The Mastery Test UI screen shows more information. The Loading Screen's tip section has been updated with new visuals. The Network Not Responding icon has also been updated. Juggernauts now have a 90% chance to drop the Furliak pod blueprint. The max waypoint range is also now 250 meters. The revive screen now requires you to hold to confirm in order to revive, and the spectator mode has been updated so that the squad panel, minimap, and HUD trackers are now visible. The spectator camera now follows the movement of the player's camera more closely. You can now spectate the other fallen corpses of your allies, and they fixed missing controller binding callouts in the spectator screen. They also fixed an issue with the current target icon not always appearing over the name of the player actually being spectated. Disruption missions are no longer eligible for Syndicate missions below level 15 due to Damalus not spawning. Paladino's Riven mod offering screen now includes the option to purchase Riven mod slots. You can now equip Veiled Kitgun Rivens on your primary weapon. They have reduced the pulsing effect frequency and size on Eidolon Vonvolus when in their energy form. Baruch's Reactive Storm Augment mod will now apply its adaptive status chance and damage type on Serene Storm area of effect attacks. Upon review, DE found some arc guns were not consistent with what the arsenal displayed, thus they have increased the speed of the Corvus and Fluctus's projectiles. They also increased the Grattler's projectile lifetime. Ivara Prime's unique effects when invisible will apply to any form of invisibility, not just her abilities. They have removed security cameras and turrets in the Corpus ship survival missions. They reduced the damage of slide attacks for dual swords in the Conclave, made minor UI tweaks in survival missions to improve readability. Projectiles from crossbows equipped with the Dali Ballistica skin now match the skin itself. They also updated the names of dojo decorations, with the example provided being Small Topiary Bush. Before, that's what it was called, and now it is Topiary Bush, and then in brackets the size of it, so in this case small. They made some adjustments to the brightness of trees on the Orican Moon tile set. Changes were made to Molecular Prime's casting effects so that it has better positioning. The Grenier Shield Lancer has been given a brand new reload animation. They updated the reload animation for the Mitre. Kuva Lich and Io-10 in-world markers will now start to fade as you approach them, with the Kuva Lich marker fading in within 20 meters and the Io-10 star marker fading in within 5 meters. They have also reduced the overall transmission frequency in survival missions, and they updated the survival tower icon on markers to match the objective UI. The health and damage resistance of Samara's targets has also been increased, and lastly, they reduced the volume radius of domestic drones in the orbiter. Hotfix 27.2.1 and 27.2.2, and the following are the changes and fixes that occurred throughout both of them. A dud grenade effect on the Kuva Brahma's cluster bombs has been removed. They increased the base status chance on Excalibur's Exalted Blade and Baruch's Desert Wind by 15%. Plus, both Chromatic Blade and Reactive Storm now stack in the same manner other status mods do. Chromatic Blade has had its status chance stat increased to 300%, and Reactive Storm's status chance has been increased to 250. The Cernos Prime status chance per projectile stat is now 30%, up from 10%. The self-stagger range on the Shadow has been reduced, And then we have a change that I failed to mention in my 27.2 coverage videos, and that was the addition of a new stat for Mag's Magnetize. This stat has been listed as Magnetic Pull, and it represents Mag's force of gravity that pulls targets towards a central enemy. It scales with power strength, and DE states that it has been added to address enemies that are only affected by the pull for brief moments, or those that ignore it completely. DE reduced the strength for Magnetic Pull to be more balanced with max strength mods. The cloak particles on Wisp were slightly toned down, an unplayable Railjack node was removed alongside an extra copy of the upgrade and mod training page in the codex, and a placeholder beacon mesh on the sentient tile set. Grendel now has a gear wheel for her Nourish ability buffs, just like with Ivara's Quiver and Vauban's Mind Layer. Grendel, when consuming sentience, can now only hold them for a short duration, and when that duration ends, the sentient will be burped back up. Grendel can also consume grenades. Titania's passive has changed, and it now heals players and herself with each ability cast by 4 health per second for 20 seconds. She'll also have improved parkour velocity, but she cannot give it to other players. Titania's Razorwing now has Blink, and they have fixed casting Razorwing right as you fall into a teleport volume in the simulacrum, resulting in an infinite white screen. Support has been added for status effect displays on boss health bars. The stealth damage bonus that was applied when you pause AI in the simulacrum has been removed. The arsenal now displays resistance values granted by mods. Spawn changes have been made to improve the flow of enemies in the Lure survival tile set. Knockdown has been removed from Elite Shield Lancer grenades. Charging weapons now have their quick shot values displayed in the arsenal under charged attacks. Players will no longer receive ghoul inbox messages. Yahoo! And the enemies that are inside Void Fissure Spire vaults that aren't engaged in combat will no longer become corrupted. DE stated that this fixes Spy Vault alarms being activated due to corruption. Next up, former Orokin reactors and catalysts and Axelis adapters have had their build time reduced to 23 hours. Magus Lockdown no longer deals damage and is limited to a maximum of 2 mines per player at a time, with each mine tethering 10 enemies. If Magus Lockdown is activated again with the 2 mines already active, the first mine will get replaced by the third. Magus Lockdown can no longer affect the Golden Maw in the Wolverine quest, which also fixes a script error occurring due to its use. As for the general changes, they have updated several damage type tips in the mission load screens and removed outdated tips. A Vault ability tip has also been moved to his arsenal tips. They also adjusted the Wholesome Your Armor text position in Nova's Lavirian to make sure it is readable in certain languages. For general changes, DE have removed the Umbra Former blueprint from the rare crate drops due to a security issue. They also said Nightwave Series 3 Glassmaker will bring back Umbra Former as a reward, and they are looking at more secure places to include it back into the drop table. The second and last general change was the added clarification for the Split Flight mod to state that no area of effect bows can have this mod equipped. There were also 2 changes that were classified as fixes by DE. Those being fixed Venari's healing aura affecting the uplink, with DE stating the uplink is intended not to be affected by abilities, and the second quote-unquote fix was Venari's healing aura affecting defense targets. The community has already pointed out that one of the tips for Korra was that of, quote, Venari's heal posture can heal defense objectives when marked. So, there's that. Let's move on. Now for the general changes. Limbo Stasis will no longer freeze sentient and amalgam enemies for the full duration of the cast, and instead will receive diminishing returns with each recast of the stasis ability on the same said enemies. So with each new cast, the time they're frozen will decrease. DE said this choice was made for 2 main reasons. 1. Limbo Stasis usage makes the gameplay of Scarlet Spear far too trivial, and 2. Sentients by design have adaptation, and the diminishing returns on recasting adheres to the adaptive nature of the enemy. They also noted that this is not intended to change the way Stasis interacts with other enemy factions. So take that as you will. This hotfix also removed Titania's exalted weapons appearing in the Codex weapons section. Now before moving to Tenogen, DE addressed the nerf hidden as a fix to Venari's healing defense objectives by stating, We made a hasty change in Hotfix 27.3.6 that removed Venari's heal aura from affecting oplinks and defense targets. Firstly, the terminology of calling Venari's defense target healing a fix was incorrect, so apologies there on my behalf. This post was made by DE Megan. It is correct to say it was a feature for Venari, considering it had its own tooltip for it. The change stemmed from our desire to resolve Operation exploits as quickly as possible, and we didn't communicate this properly. A new relic has been added, that being Lith N4, and it contains the Bronco Prime blueprint, because, well, DE removed all the relics containing said blueprint, so this fixes that. There was one Titania change, and that was officially making it so Lantern does not affect already frozen in-time enemies, and now if the ability is cast on said affected enemies, the energy used will be refunded. Under general changes, DE have changed what occurs when travelling to Little Duck in Fortuna. We will no longer enter her dialogue state, and instead will be placed next to her, which allows us to transfer into the operator and access her options. The Atlas Prime Neuroptics in the Lith N4 relic has been replaced with the Atlas Prime systems due to rarity. They updated the Garuda Sakura helmet to better match the reflectivity of the body, and they refined the logic that decides when to direct crashes to the memory page of the Warframe website or to DE's bug database. DE have made it so the Grenier Forest tile set ferns will now dither when the camera is close to them to apparently help visibility when shooting. In 27.3.15.1, DE changed the Alliance message of the day to read Edit Alliance Message instead of Edit Clan Message when attempting to edit said message. Next up, we have changes for the Simulor and the Cyanoid Simulor. Increased per stack damage for stacked orbs. The Simulor went from 20 to 50, and the Cyanoid Simulor went from 20 to 80. Increased damage of exploding vortexes. For the Simulor, 75 to 100, and the Cyanoid Simulor, 75 to 240. They've increased the duration of active vortexes to 20 seconds before they explode, unless it is done manually. They've reduced the lifetime duration of a single orb before it explodes, while also saying this allows single projectiles to be used offensively as they now detonate quickly and have had their damage increase significantly. Creating vortexes now happens rather quickly. Shoot 4 orbs in quick succession to create a fully powered vortex. With this, we also added a max number of active orbs to 4, while also continuing added a max number of active vortexes at a time to 3, and increased the orb stack count to reach a fully powered vortex from 3 to 4. With this significant increase in damage and lifetime of active vortexes, and with the added bonus of individual orbs providing more utility, adding a cap to the number of active vortexes and increasing the orb count for max vortexes felt appropriate to strike balance with the changes. Once 3 maxed out vortexes are active, the Simulor will now default to single shot orbs, with the reduced lifetime of a single orb. With them finishing, there are now more ways to use the Simulor against enemies. They also remove the initial stagger on enemies that would occur on vortex creation, saying, we remove this effect so that enemies aren't pushed out of range of the vortex as much, and they also updated the Simulor and Cyanoid Simulor's effects. Now we go to the healing and damage reduction abilities affecting static defendable objects. DE said in a pre-release developer workshop that released after a fix was made to Venari's ability to heal objectives, quote, we want more healing abilities to work to allow for more synergies to emerge in various mission types. Healing these objectives can serve well as an alternative or a complement to the commonly used defensive abilities such as Frost Snow Globe, Gara's Mass Vitrify, and Limbo's Cataclysm. 100% heals is not what we want to do, so we are instead allowing the effects with some objective-specific adjustments as to not trivialize the game modes. So the changes, what affects it, and what's allowed. Gara's Mending Splinters Augment will affect objectives with 3 health per second for each active splinter. Hildren's Haven ability will affect objectives and will provide 500 max shields and recharge shields 80% faster. Trinity's Blessing will heal objectives by 500 health over 5 seconds, and this cannot be stacked. Equinox's Mend will affect objectives and will grant shields and heal for 500 over 5 seconds, and it cannot be stacked. Vazarin's Protective Dash will affect objectives and will no longer provide invulnerability and will heal for 500 health over 5 seconds and cannot stack. Chorus Kavat Venari will heal for 50 health per second and will be able to work on objectives again. Hydroid's Curative Undertow Augment will affect objectives by healing 100 health per 1.5 seconds. Harrow's Penance on objectives will heal but will be capped up to 50 health per second. Oberon's Renew will work on objectives and have a 125 burst heal with 50 health per second. Garuda's Blood Siphon will not affect objectives because, quote, for flavor, they think it shouldn't apply. Inaros's Scarab Swarm will affect the objectives and will heal for damage dealt by swarm projectiles divided by allies in range. Nidus's Ravenous will affect objectives, healing 20 health per second. Wisp's Vitality Mote heals will affect objectives and will inherit an increase to target's health by 300 and will heal for 30 health per second. Volt's Capacitance will affect objectives but will cap at 250 shields and grant no overshields. Titania's passive will affect objectives 4 health per second for 20 seconds. The Sancti Magister will affect objectives but will heal over time up to 500 health over 5 seconds, and this cannot be stacked with other players. The Ancient Healer will continue to affect objectives at 100 health every 20 seconds, the Rejuvenation Aura will heal objectives at 3 health per second, and Arcane Pulse will affect objectives for 150 health when procced. Damage reduction abilities will also work on static defendable objects. Trinity's Blessing will provide a capped 50% damage reduction to objectives. Mirage's Total Eclipse will provide a capped 50% damage reduction to objectives. Titania's Thorns will not affect the objectives. Gara's Splinter Storm, Amber's Immolated Radiance, Baruch's Desolate Hands, Harrow's Warding Thurible, and Nezha's Warding Halo will affect objectives, but their damage reduction will be capped at 50%. Now for the general changes. Titania Prime has been given her own unique dodge and roll animations that flow better with her floating movement. Instead of having to re-aim at your placed waypoint to remove it, you can now hold G. They've improved the look of rain with deferred rendering enabled in the Plains of Eidolon on surfaces so that they look less like grey, boring puddles. Helmuth Sis can now be removed in the Helmuth Infirmary after 1 day as opposed to waiting a whole week. You can now sell your duplicate Garuda, Harrow, Octavia, Revenant, and Nidus blueprints for 2,500 credits from your inventory. You can now sell Syndicate 10-time restores for 2,500 credits, and they've increased the status chance of the Twin Grakadas to match their mechanic of firing 2 rounds at once. They have polished the handleless cartwheel and knockback animations from self-interrupt weapons. They've also fixed the knockback distance and slide to be more aligned so that the weapon isn't just standing still. They've changed Grendel's nourishability description to inflict toxin damage on feasted enemies in Grendel's Guard 1 by 1, absorbing nourishment to buff allies. Tap to cycle through buffs and hold to cast. We've also updated the grunge of the Corbu Shorzin to make it edgier for all your shredding needs. Polish the Grattler Heavy Gun's fire and reload animations, which also fixes an errant animation that played when equipped. They updated the effects for Corpus Osprey projectiles, improved camera collision against water so that it doesn't penetrate and go underwater as much, improved Mirage's sleight of hand detection of light and dark areas to decide which booby trap to spawn, and they also fixed a bug where the package could use the wrong type of explosion based on light and dark in certain situations. They made some slight changes to the Corinth Prime sound mix. Multiple invites from players will no longer stack the invited receive sound effect to save your ears from increasing volume. If a player sends an invite to someone who has Do Not Disturb mode on, it will now say player name is using Do Not Disturb and will not receive invitations. They reduced the Basmu's firing sound effect for other players. Korra's spikes are now an auxiliary attachment to give players more customization options with Syandanas. They added support to sword and board skins to have consistent main hand holster positions and scaling regardless of base weapon. This also fixes the Sigma and Octantis shield popping closed and open again when holstering. They made updates and optimizations to several weapon effects including kit guns, made minor general explosion effect updates, increased the text fields of the mastery rank up message to better accommodate other languages, updated the Orokin tree mesh and materials to be higher quality. You can now customize your Kavat's emissive color, which will affect their tail and eye color, which also fixes not being able to change the color of the fan-like Kavat tails due to it being based on energy color. Titania can no longer play the Shorzin while in Razorwing due to it resulting in a very broken flying state. They improved Lisette previews for the Xiphos and other ships by adding respective Lisette animations, effects, and more. They reduced the Shadow's projectile brightness effect. Domestic drones will no longer start semi-hidden in the decoration placement mode, and they will now be fully visible instead of its previously glowy state. They updated the infested hit and stagger reactions to give players more understanding of when player attacks are landing, and minor tweaks were made to Excalibur's radial javelin cast effect, and they gave it some ground interaction with ice chunks when cast over ice, and other stuff. For general UI changes, the in-game market has received a refreshed look with the addition of top-level filters. Your chosen UI theme is now reflected when viewing the in-game market, with DE stating, "Now that the market uses themes, you can now see more details about items on hover and can tab to see weapon stats." They have moved the market filters to be grouped with the search bar, and they've added a filter to hide mastered items. They added a new tag for new items, and they added a starburst effect to the "Thank you for your purchase" screen. They added a preview button to items in your inventory that will take you to their page in the in-game market, and they also added this feature for prime items in your inventory to learn more about them. They also updated the Relic Pack Relic content screen when purchased in the in-game market and from syndicates, and it will now show each relic's contents better by being categorized by rarity. They also added common, uncommon, and rare tooltips over rarity icons. The invite screen has a fresh new look, and it has been polished with an addition of count of online friends and clan members. They also improved the hover indicator to be clear when selecting from the list. For bounty screens in Cetus and Fortuna, they have added daily standing cap to the screens. The leaderboard screen has been refreshed to apply your chosen UI theme and display information options in a cleaner way. You will now be met with a confirmation prompt when choosing to close Warframe by using the X button in the game window. They've added a Riven-compatible items component to the Riven Unveil screens when unveiling a Riven and when viewing a Riven via chat link. The trading screen will now prompt you with a warning when you're about to trade an Arcane that is currently equipped. You can now search the mod section of the codex via drop location by entering the location in the search bar, such as Arbitrations, Nightwave, Earth, and more. Banshee, Excalibur, Umbra, Frost, Necros, Nova, Nyx, Saren, Valkyr, and Zephyr ability videos have been added to their respective arsenal screens, and they've reduced spacing between minimap and objective text when fighting Eidolons. After the release of Update 27.4 Railjack Revisited, a total of 4 hotfixes have gone live. These are the patch notes, and like usual, they are grouped together per category. So, starting with the changes. In point 1, DE made it so the Arcane launcher blueprint would be consumed upon crafting, and they had also noted in the patch notes that they were looking at adding the Arcane launcher blueprint to Cephalon Samaris' offerings for those that need it post the Arcane quest, as well as some other related issues they had found. However, this was reverted in 27.4.2, and the Arcane launcher blueprint is no longer consumed on use and will always be available to craft in the Foundry. Anyway, DE added Oberon's ability videos to his arsenal, they returned the Simulor Vortex lifetime to a 5-second duration in the Conclave, and they removed an unreleased UI theme, which will come with the Deadlock Protocol. In point 2, DE removed the Stance Former eligibility on exalted weapons due to Stance Former providing no benefit to the weapons, and they also removed the inaccurate information found in the in-game market tooltip for Titania Prime accessories. In point 3, DE made it so Stance Former is eligible to be installed on Garuda's Talons due to her Talons using standard stance mods, and it should be noted that the community was quick to point out that all these stances that can be on Garuda's Talons are the same polarity. So there's that. Anyway, point 4, enemy summons can now be mind-controlled by abilities. They noted, previously there was a mechanic where owned NPCs would not be affected by mind control, but now this only applies to allied-owned NPCs, so there's no misleading things happening with mind control abilities. So for the changes with these hotfixes, DE tweaked the tooltip in the launcher to avoid people confusing themselves with the bulk download option. They cleaned up the profile stats by removing the list of scanned items, since that information is in the codex. The Pluto Oceanum nodes tile set has been changed to the Corpus Ship tile set on the star chart to provide it with the newly refreshed spy vaults. They've also said apologies that this one slipped through the mainline cracks. The Larkspur now has force feedback when using a controller. They've reduced the Floof and Noggle Dojo decoration cost from 20 to 5, and they rotated the Suprema heavy sword skin so it faces the proper way. Valkyr's Enraged Hysteria augment now has a one-time energy cost of 50 instead of draining energy over time. They've also noted that this allows you to gain energy while it's active. They also moved some of the Sorgor conservation start points to not start in a cave. This one has been a long time coming, and that's that Digital Extremes removes stasis from the game. All of your companions can now be selected from the companion tab in your arsenal without the need for visiting the companion terminal and waiting for that transition. Any purchased stasis slots have been converted to companion slots, so for those wondering about that, there you go. In regards to the puppy companions and having them move around your room or maturing them, there will be a pop-up upon selecting them in the companion tab, so make your choice there. If incubation is started while you have a roaming pup or other animal, they will just be returned to your inventory. Also, for those that purchased or acquired the Nutrio Incubator segment, DE has changed its function to disable DNA degradation. Also, while we're here, the breed of your companion is now shown next to the pet's name in the description. Nodes on the star chart have been updated with a new look when the player hovers above it, plus a drop-down menu has been added for multi-mode nodes. The reset decoration option has been moved to the decoration mode HUD and has been renamed to Clear Decorations. The Blazing Step ephemera has been removed from the Elite Sanctuary Onslaught rewards table and can now be purchased from the Arbitration store in the Relay for 30 Vitus Essence. The ephemera can also drop from the Railjack commanders as it has a 5% drop chance. Selling and dissolving ranked mods and scrapping ranked avionics now refunds 75% of the invested endo and credits, or in the case of Railjack parts, Dirac. The Earth to Mars junction now awards the Iron Phoenix stance, and the Earth to Venus junction now awards the Clashing Forest stance. DE have removed Copernicus from the mining nodes on the Orvalis and moved them to the Eximus enemies in the Lua tileset. And Pustrals have been removed from the mining nodes in the Plains of Eidolon, as they have been added to the Eximus enemies in the Infested Ship tileset. The rank up effect for Warframes, weapons, and companions has been given a new refresh, with the effect applying your chosen energy color. Shield gating has been disabled in the Dojo obstacle course when you hit intended instant fail traps. They have updated the following augment mods to replace the terminology of proc with status: Vexing Retaliation, Shocking Speed, Tidal Impunity, Neutron Star, Hallowed Eruption, and Piercing Roar. The Golden Hand promo code glyph design has changed to reduce matching iconography with real-life movements, and it now has the imagery of the Corpus Founder. For those wondering, the Razorback will have a remastered arena when it returns. Whether it's the Jackal's remastered area or a new area, we don't know. The hit effects on the Sonos Prime and Paris Prime have been reduced. The Opticore will now queue charging if you click and hold during its refire wait time. Some Fortuna hammering NPCs have been tweaked to be more in sync with each other. Corpus ship Captura scenes, freight, and maintenance have been updated to the new remastered tileset under the names of Artillery Battery Scene and Corpus Depository Scene. The Nagan Tarka's firing animation has been polished and tweaked to reduce possible motion blur issues. The Fortress Container Codex entry now reads Polished, Storage, Crate, and Container. Glass texturing in the game has been polished to improve volumetrics, reflection simulation, and more. Reinforced glass has also been removed from the Corpus ship tileset. The elemental effects on Garuda's talons have been slightly reduced. The companion mower's parkour movements have been improved when attempting to follow or catch up with its owner. Arc gun animations have been updated, and DE has fixed an issue where players could slide around during the cooldown animation of the arc gun, and the Galaxian Vandal is now tradable. For the Kuva Brahma changes, the Kuva Brahma's ammo reserve has been lowered from 15 to 5, and it now gains fewer arrows from ammo pickups. It will produce 3 cluster bombs on impact, down from 7. The cluster projectile's radial attack size has been increased from 2.7 meters to 3.5, and the cluster projectile's fall-off has been reduced from 100% to 50%. The description of the weapon has also been updated. Garuda's talons have also seen changes. The damage has been increased from 180 to 248, their status chance has gone from 30 to 36, and the critical chance has been increased from 10% to 20%. The Arcane Derelict has been moved to Deimos, next to Mars on the star chart. Derelict missions no longer require keys to access them, and they have matchmaking enabled. Any keys you had previous to this change have been converted into credits and resources, and if you have any nav coordinates, they can be sold by the player for extra credits. As for what happens to players on the Steel Path with their unique emote and trophy for each region completed, finishing the Deimos region will give you both the Deimos and Derelict rewards regardless of whether you have previously finished the Derelicts. The UI, a number of the game's UI screens have been updated, with the end of mission screen and mission progress screen having received the following functionality changes. They have added a collapse and expand button. Rewards can be sorted by importance, name, or type. The rewards section now has a search bar. Stats and progression can be selected via the bottom right of the screen, and the end of mission screen now includes medals. DE noting that these are fun stats that highlight unique mission achievements aside from the usual, such as lockers opened, syndicate medallions found, and much more. They also updated the entire inbox system alongside generic UI screens to UI 3.0. As for the Steel Path game mode, the resource drop chance boosters now apply to Steel Essence and Riven Sliver drops within the Steel Path missions. This comes after Digital Extremes failed to disclose that paid boosters or acquired boosters from missions did not affect the new game mode's resources, and failed to comment on the situation until the change was issued. Once the boosters were enabled on top of the existing game type booster, DE said the following. To confirm player theories and clarify, previous to this hotfix, resource drop chance boosters did not affect Steel Essence or Riven Sliver drops in the Steel Path. It was not our intention to hide or subvert that information in-game, and we should have clarified more quickly that this was the case. Saying this doesn't change what appears to be the broader issue, which is concerns with the Steel Essence drop rates. We are still gathering data on acquisition rates, but ultimately we are all hands on deck, working to make Heart of Deimos the best it can be for August 25th. As for this hotfix, any tenno who has already walked the Steel Path will receive a resource drop chance booster, which was a 3-day booster. This hotfix ensures that the resource drop chance boosters work within the Steel Path for Riven Slivers and Steel Essence. They were initially turned off to ensure the inherent Steel Path resource drop chance booster worked as intended. Like the initial Arcane marketplace in Scarlet Spear, we wanted to ensure the automatic 100% Steel Path resource drop chance booster didn't unintentionally scale for resources specific to the Steel Path, that being Riven Slivers and Steel Essence. This, unfortunately, also affected player-obtained reward resource drop chance boosters. Changes were made to Zephyr's Airburst. Zephyr's Airburst ability now has two behaviors based on if you're holding to cast or tapping to cast. Zephyr's Airburst original functionality is now activated by holding to cast, with a note that generate a burst of massively dense air that explodes on contact and sends enemies flying. Launch airbursts into tornadoes to make them grow. By tapping Zephyr's Airburst, it now sucks in enemies instead of pushing them away. They also increased airburst projectile speed by 50% and increased airburst casting animation speed by 20%. For Trinity's Well of Life ability changes, DE said the following. Well of Life now passively heals allies in a radius around the target. There's a base of 100 health per second within 8 meters. Shooting the held target gives extra health to all allies in range, that being a base of 1% of the damage dealt to the victim, instead of only the person who may be attacked. Well of Life also no longer increases the health of the target, as this was an old solution to prevent other players from killing the target too fast. Instead, it uses a more modern approach, similar to Nyx's Mind Control, where the damage gets stored and then dealt at the end of the ability. For general Warframe ability changes, they increase the cold status effects from 1 to 6 for the frost abilities of Freeze, Ice Wave, and Avalanche. Ivara's Artemis Bow now has a 20% status chance per projectile, and they also slightly tweaked how status chance and multi-shot are displayed in the arsenal stats. They made Loki's decoy more visible with darker energy colors, and it now uses its secondary energy colors. They tweaked Mag's greedy pull to pull over 0.75 seconds, and Wukong's Iron Staff now has a 100% damage block, with the note that all melee weapons are intended to have perfect blocking after Melee 3.0, but Wukong's Staff slipped through the cracks. Warframe blueprint and component costs from Samaras have been reduced by 50%. Operator amp damage conversion Arcanes now convert to 98% max, so they can always deal a bit of void damage. The defense alarm will now sound at the start of every wave in the Arcane defense missions. They added the infinite UI symbol to the Zenith's secondary fire punch-through. They increased Jackal's grid wall damage attack, but removed its ability to apply a status effect. They added a Parazon spinning revive animation when reviving a player with the Parazon equipped. They made improvements towards AI pathing flow in the Corpus ship tile sets, removed unintended dirtiness on the Limbo Lamina collection items. Every squad mate now gets a single dojo pigment drop per enemy killed, rather than one player getting 1 to 4 pigments. They updated the Solaris named Dojo decorations to Orb Valus, made a slight boost to the muzzle flash size to improve visibility on the Corinth Prime. They cleaned up the melee grip effects across all the Prime, Syndicate, Prisma, etc. weapons, added effect pulses to K-Drive race points, with a note that they also removed a rogue point in one of the Orb Valus races. Disabled some optimizations that may be causing Warframe to crash in some languages, added music to the end of mission screen, and reverted some of the new Parazon revive animations due to clients becoming stuck reviving. As for the changes with 27.5, the description for the double tap mod has been updated to include its double stacking function when equipped outside of Conclave. It now reads, on hit, 20% bonus damage on next hit for 2 seconds, and that stacks up to 20 times outside of Conclave. The Latron's heads-up display now displays the buff combo status when equipped with the double tap mod, and they also fixed the double tap mod resetting its buff on every shot, as opposed to the intended reset on miss. Greetings everyone, update 29, players can now use their weapons while using their K-Drive after using the interact key of F on PC. The daily standing cap has also been increased significantly at the low end, and slight changes have been made as you get to the high end. At Mastery Rank 0, your daily cap is 8,500, MR1, 9,250, MR2, 10,000, MR3, 10,750, MR4, 11,500, MR5, 12,250, MR6, 13,000, MR7, 13,750, MR8, 14,500, MR9, 15,250, MR10, 16,000, MR11, 16,750, MR12, 17,500, MR13, 18,250, MR14, 19,000, MR15, 19,750, MR16, 20,500, MR17, 21,250, MR18, 22,000, MR19, 22,750, MR20, 23,500, MR21, 24,250 daily scanning, up from 22,000. MR22, 25,000 standing, MR23, 25,750, MR24, 26,500, MR25, 27,250, MR26, 28,000, MR27, 28,750, MR28, 29,500, MR29, 30,250, and then at Mastery Rank 30, you will have a daily standing cap limit of 31,000. Now, the mission summary and end of mission screen has seen changes. They've reordered various rewards in the end of mission screen, so Syndicate medallions now appear above mods and resources, and mods now always appear above resources of the same rarity. They have removed the sort by type option, since sorting by importance already does that in a more logical way. They updated the conclave and index scoreboard window with the new end of mission screen style, added a hide button to the top left corner of the mission summary and end of mission screen, with the ability to hover over the eye icon to hide the mission summary UI to get a clear shot of your surroundings if it's needed while reviewing stats mid-mission. DE also noted that this icon also removes the UI overall from the Warframe diorama in the backdrop in the end of mission screen. Now you can take screenshots of your squad looking cool. The exit button will now pulse when it is available upon returning to your orbiter. The squad overlay now appears on the end of mission and results screen in the mission and after returning to the orbiter. Pausing Warframe while previewing mission results now closes the mission results tab before opening the pause screen to avoid overlapping UI. They have added some medals to the end of mission screen related to life support capsules and modules as well as excavator power cells. When returning from a free roam location to the respective town, that being Plains of Ardal and Tacitus and whatever, the end of mission screen will no longer stop player movement until after the initial animation ends. They also reduced the colored backer visibility with the quick view mission summary window, and they added new music to the end of mission screen. For the Quelor changes, they decreased the alternate fire ammo cost from 75 to 50 and increased the lifetime of the alternate fire projectile from 0.095 seconds to 0.12 seconds. For general changes, Acolyte mods have been redistributed into Entrati bounties as we are sunsetting the rerunning of that event. Mag's Magnetize now has an added functionality as seen in the Awakening cinematic, with DE noting that when Magnetize is held versus tap to cast, Mag now creates and holds a magnetized bubble in front of her that absorbs projectiles. Recasting the ability will throw the absorbed damage in a cone back onto the enemies. Mag can also walk while holding that bubble. Free roam landscapes now have a custom icon in the star chart. Enemy beacons are now disabled for invasion missions due to numerous beacon spawns not attacking you when you use them in an invasion mission where you're also allied with the respective team. Improvements were made towards hair shading when deferred rendering is enabled. The Aero, Motus, and Proton mod sets now have unique set icons. Deimos nodes have been added to the mix for sorties, syndicates, and void fisher missions. You can now hold X and release it to dismount from your K drive. They've updated the Athodi's description to indicate that headshot kills trigger overdrive. They removed some legacy system spec warnings from the launcher. Choosing to contribute the maximum number of Syndicate medallions will now round up to allow filling the standing capacity instead of stopping short. They also noted that incrementing number of medallion contributions and single medallion contributions will now respect this limit. Lastly, they changed the Fragor Brock skin's 10% lower channeling efficiency to -1 second of combo duration. For changes, they removed the 2 Entrati character token sacrifices required to earn the first Entrati rank up as there were issues with accessibility. They removed the Helminth Interact context action until you have installed the Helminth segment. Cambion Drift is now always shown in the star chart if you have not completed the Heart of Deimos quest, and upon hovering over it, it will be locked with a tooltip to complete the Heart of Deimos to access it. They have reduced the overall sounds of the Necromech, including very loud death sounds. Sound tweaks were made to the platform ascend and descend moment during the Heart of Deimos quest, and slight tweaks were made towards crafting sounds in the Necrolist. For changes, infested fish within the Cambion Drift are now always guaranteed to provide their respective fish parts when cut. Descriptions of fish parts now also include the exact fish source information, with a note from DE that the RNG behind fish parts did not sit right based on player feedback, and DE agrees. Our intentions didn't outweigh the value in this case. The Conservation Entrati member now sells a Trank rifle for those who have not yet acquired one from Fortuna. They added a View Cinematic button for Awakening in the Quest Codex section, with a note from DE that this allows you to view the opening cinematic without going into the full tutorial. They added a Zaku blueprint to Cephalon Samaris' offerings for those who have completed the Heart of Deimos quest. They reduced the Necromech Storm Shroud ability damage immunity from 1 to 0.8. This ability now functions similar to Iron Skin. They increased the Necromax Reach mod base melee range from plus 0.17 to plus 0.25. Improvements were made towards the Necrolist to Cambion Drift hallway trigger placements, so players may walk up to the door without leaving the loading trigger, with a note from DE that this also fixes misleading sizes of extraction zone radiuses on the minimap. Mining veins now have a UI marker present when the cutter drill is equipped and you're close to it. Improvements were made to mining effects and materials in the Cambion Drift to improve visibility. Improvements were made towards different matchmaking scenarios within Deimos, so join in progress, join from a Necrolist, and join from the Cambion Drift, and more, and slight effect tweaks were made to the Deimos node in the star chart. For changes, the Deimos Bounty credit cash rewards have been replaced with an IA-10 Amber Star. They added descriptive text to the Scintillant to expose its secondary acquisition path. They added an invulnerability period when transferring into Necromax found in the Cambion Drift. They reduced the Vulpaphiler's Revive precepts from 5 ranks to 3 ranks, as the extra 2 serve no purpose, with refunded credits and Endo being deployed to players. They added more sound effects for the Vulpaphiler. The end of mission screen music will now properly duck sound effects, and performance improvements were made towards the Cambion Drift terrain textures. For the Isolation Vault Bounty changes and fixes, they updated the Cambion Drift Isolation Vault Bounty description to hint at clearing multiple vaults in the same session for better rewards. They moved 2 Scintillant spawn pods within the Isolation Vaults to be in more trafficked areas, and they reduced the amount of spawned residue per worm puddle from 5 to 3, and also lowered the amount of residue needed for the first stage of the Isolation Vault Bounty, so 6 residue is for 1 or 2 player teams, and 12 residue is for 3 or 4 player teams. They've made token rank balancing and conservation token balancing changes, with DE saying, ranking up the Entrati Syndicate will now require a maximum of 1 Entrati token type per rank, so 1 conservation and 1 fishing. Anyone who has already ranked up will receive a refund. We have also done a significant rebalance pass of conservation's role in the Entrati economy based on feedback. So, they have reduced the animal tags required to complete a 1 token task by 50%. They've reduced the average number of animal tags required for Capture Deimos Wildlife tasks, which give 3, 4, and 5 tokens. They fixed some Capture Deimos Wildlife tasks appearing as doubles, giving twice the intended tokens without costing twice as much, and they added a daily special for conservation to match the daily special for fishing. For Isolation Vault Bounty changes and fixes, they increased the bait defense time from 60 seconds to 90 seconds and increased the enemy reinforcements. They lowered the drop rate of the infested anti-toxin during the toxin level phase to increase difficulty. The toxin level will now greatly increase if players leave the designated area in an effort to increase the team coordination and difficulty, and they replaced the volatile runner with a Deimos runner in the toxin level phase. Scintillant changes. Overnight, we ran stats and the amount collected was too low, which is widely accepted from the community to be the case. While we all start with a baseline of 0 for new updates, this resource is an outlier in how slowly it's been accrued, which is to say current pacing was not our intention. They should feel like a revised Cetus Wisp, but when we compared the two overnight, and considering more people are playing Heart of Deimos and how many Scintillant are needed, they were lower to a degree that doesn't make sense with their hookup. Here is how we are fixing that today. The Isolation Bounty Necromax now have a chance to drop Scintillant. They've also fixed issues with being unable to pick up Scintillant within the Vault environments. They increased the spawn chance and spawn radius size of the Scintillant within Vault environments, removed Scintillant as one of the weapons Entrati members' parts requisition tasks, and added a slight glow effect to the Scintillant to increase visibility, on top of increasing the audio loop sound effect when a Scintillant is nearby. For game changes, player usable Necromax that you can transference into on the Cambion Drift no longer drop rewards, with a note from DE that transferring into a Necromax and then standing around waiting for it to die to drop rewards is far from the intentions of the Necromax system. We understand that this is a frustrating oversight. Additionally, this was often bugged that only one person got the drop at all. Enemy Necromax in the Isolation Vaults will still drop rewards, and now they'll drop more of them. You can now enjoy Deimos from afar as a new planet backdrop when back in your orbiter. Appearance improvements were made towards maggot and crawler death effects. They've optimized mining visibility more by preventing certain pulsing aspects of the world overlapping nodes. They have optimized locations of esophage exit ports, reduced camera shake on the second stage of the Heart of Deimos quest, the Hydroid Rakam Kraken will now be the deluxe version when casting Undertow, and they tweaked the holstered idle pose of the Keratinos to avoid clipping. 4 game changes. Damaged necromech parts and weapon parts are now tradable. They enabled proper necroloid items to be a free reward for hitting rank 3. DE have improved alignments of the expand arrow on the end of mission screen, improved effects on the heart in a certain quest stage. They increased the rarity on the botanist mod to rare, and added proximity markers to the mollusks so it's easier to spot them and gather samples during the relevant bounty. 4 helmet changes and fixes. You can now rush subsume when hovering over the active subsume ability with the helmet, with a note from DE that rushing a subsume will not result in a flower until the next time you visit the orbiter. Please also note we have made this change based on player requests for it, despite it not being in the original design. Zymos changes. The clip size has been increased from 9 to 17, and the ammo pool has been increased from 27 to 51. For overall game changes, Zaku's Gaze ability has been added to the Railjack tactical menu. Zaku will now hide their Sayandana and armor pieces during their vast untime ability to prevent floating objects, with a note from DE that we are about 1 week away from a full community feedback pass on Zaku's abilities, so sit tight. Conservation animal tags and wounded animal tags will now appear in the UI pop-up banner, similar to Argon crystals upon collecting an animal. You can now fast travel to the Necroloid Syndicate in the Necrolist after speaking with them. Improvements were made towards the Necromech guard mode equip and unequip flow to be cleaner and usability functions better. They added and tweaked many Intrati member voiceover transmissions, with the note that these tweaks include ensuring some voiceover transmissions don't repeat endlessly. They also increased the aggressiveness of Deimos' reinforcements, tweaked reload sounds on the Trumna, added descriptions to Helmet's secretions, and added HUD timers to Valbin's mine layer grenades. For Helmet changes, they added Helmet ability videos on hover of the respective abilities. Deimos bounty changes. Scintillant, in the common tier of a Deimos bounty, now has correct rarity weights within that tier. Previously, it was applying its rare tier drop chance within the common tier, so it's now a 18% drop chance. For a conservation change, a marker will now appear when spotting conservation scat through the Trank rifle scope or if a lure is equipped. And for game changes, they reduced the drop chance of Furliap pod blueprints for Deimos Juggernauts to 5% and changed the Necromech deflection mod name to Necromech Redirection, since we used Redirection for max shield mods. For Necromech changes and fixes, Necromechs can no longer interact with ramparts or hack alarm towers in the plains of Eidolon, which also fixes a functionality loss when interacting with a rampart while in a Necromech and hacking issues specifically with a plains alarm tower. They've also adjusted the Necromech drop tables to have a mix of mods in the Necroloid Syndicate as well as on Necromechs outright. They also removed Necromech Vitality, Refuel, Necromech Intensity, and Necromech Pressure Point from Necromech drops, and move them to Lloyd's Necroloid offerings for standing. For general weapon changes, the Trumna. DE has removed punch through on the Trumna's alt fire projectile, with a note that the main feature of the alt fire is the radial attack on each bounce, and punch through can make it disappear through geometry. Disabling on the projectile only allows punch through to be used with the primary fire without affecting the alt fire. And with Aquasis, they increase the heavy attack projectiles from 35 to 76 and reduce the horizontal spread of the projectiles. And for the Zymos, they decrease the projectile spread of multi-shot projectiles and increase the projectile speed from 59 to 79. For changes, the Awakening cinematic now supports translated subtitles. They added the Ether Daggers to Samaris' offerings for players who might have sold theirs, and they updated Deimos' mutagen and anti-gen descriptions to indicate which animal they are designated for, either the Predacite or Vulpaphyla, and also improvements were made towards operator eye textures and shading to look less fat. For changes, the Deimos landscape Captura scene is now an option for a rank 5 Entrati Syndicate reward, and blueprints and Entrati tokens will now appear closer to the top of the end of mission reward section when ordered by importance instead of being buried under mods and resources, and the game has reduced in size by 5 GB. The first round of Zaku changes follow. For Zaku's passive, they have increased the AoE damage reduction as part of Zaku's passive. They have said that the AoE damage will simply take a 25% damage reduction, or 75% while the Vast Untime is active. For Zarda's Whisper, they are making void damage true neutral by removing the 50% resistance of void damage on cloned flesh and fossilized enemies. For Grasp of Lock, they have increased the speed at which enemies are disarmed so that it occurs early in the casting animation, and they also increase the casting animation speed overall. They increased Grasp of Lock's disarming range from 8 meters to 15, and they allowed Grasp of Lock to be recast, with a note that any existing Grasp of Lock weapons will simply be replaced by the new cast up to the maximum amount of targets. For the Lost with Deny, adding synergy between Deny and Grasp of Lock that increases Deny's damage output. The number of weapons orbiting Zaku from Grasp of Lock act as a damage multiplier for Deny's Void Beam. For example, if you have 4 weapons orbiting Zaku, Deny's damage will be granted a 5 times multiplier, and they also increase the casting speed of Deny. For Vast Untime, they removed the energy drain and kept it a duration-based ability. They also added synergy between Vast Untime and all of Zaku's other abilities, with a note: emphasis on Untime. When Zaku is in their skeletal form, their other active abilities' duration will become frozen in time. Once the Vast Untime expires, the duration of those abilities resume. This was suggested in our feedback readings, and we quite enjoyed the play on the Untime theme and the added benefit to Zaku overall. We feel that since this no longer has an energy drain and that it halts the timer on other abilities, the energy demands of Zaku's kit will be significantly lessened. Note, this will not apply to Helminth abilities and abilities from other Warframes from Helminth subsuming. Now we go to marked for death changes within the subsume system. Before we jump into the nitty-gritty, let's revisit what the Mark for Death Helminth infusion is. Stun an enemy, and a portion of the next damage you deal to it will be dealt to all enemies around it. It's important to note that the description mentions a portion of the next damage, which was always our intent, meaning we have some bugs to fix and explanations to make on the next steps here. With Mark for Death now in the wild and being experimented with, it was apparent to not be working as intended by overwhelmingly nuking enemies left, right, and center when combined with certain loadouts and due to certain bugs. We recognize the players who brought this forward with understanding that it needs to be addressed. So let's get into the meat of it. DE have fixed mods applying twice to the Mark for Death damage portion dealt in the AoE. They fixed base damage using the health and shield damage dealt and not cap at the health and shield the target had prior. As an example, enemies with 5 health gets hit by 100 damage and the 100 damage is shared in the AoE. It should have just been 5. The radial damage was never meant to exceed the target's health, and this was our bad. The desired strategy we wanted was players prioritizing tank units like heavy gunners to do AoE clears, since heavy units have more health than normal. Thus, the radial AoE would likely be lethal, not just normal units. This issue combined with numerous bugs of mod stacking meant this was way overpowered. A key part of reviewing these changes will be ensuring that players understand the best case scenario we envision for the power is targeting high health enemies to do radial damage to weaker enemies. So they have also removed the critical chance from Marked for Death's radial AoE, they capped the damage multiplier stat to 75% and normalized the damage type Malts. They also said the following: here is an example of a normalized damage type. If the damage you deal is 0.5 impact, 0.4 slash, 0.3 heat, that sums to 1.2 times, but after normalizing they become 0.42 impact, 0.33 slash, and 0.25 heat. Lastly, for this change, they fixed Mark for Death with Arcane Trickery equipped, triggering invisibility almost every time because each enemy hit by the AoE has its own 15% chance to activate Arcane Trickery. Moving on, conservation changes. An accumulation of community and developer feedback have brought forth a handful of Avicia changes and fixes. Avicias now correctly fly in circles around the spawn area once they reach it instead of hovering directly above it, sometimes widely out of range. They diversified ambient Avicia encounters so that they can either be encountered flying around an area or low down perched on the ground. They also increased the spawn chances of ambient Avicia encounters, and improvements were made towards Avicia animations, which also fixes cases of ambiently spawned Avicias slowly ascending to the heavens. For fishing changes, they improve the spawn rate of fish in the Cambion Drift to be closer to past free roam behavior, with a note that you should generally have a maximum time between fish of 15 seconds instead of 50 seconds. They also reduce the number of fish parts required per daughter exocrine assignment from 3 down to 2, which also brings daughter's economy in line with the sun, where the max number of requested parts is 2. For Necromech changes, currently there is a 3-minute cooldown on every use of the Necromech summon gear item. They have changed the cooldown behavior of the Necromech summon to reflect the following. If the player's Necromech is still alive, then the Necromech summon only has a 10-second cooldown. Summoning it this way will move the Necromech to the player's desired position, but not restore its health, shields, or energy. If the player's Necromech has been destroyed, then the Necromech summon has a 3-minute cooldown and will have its health, shields, energy refilled on summon. They've also reduced the Necromech's shocking iron ability Sound Loop. For Sepulchrum changes, they decrease the unguided flight time of the Altfire on launch from 0.06 seconds to 0.03 seconds. They decrease the unguided flight time on the Altfire smoothing from 1 second to 0.4 seconds, which also makes the Altfire projectile start to home in on their targets faster and curve more accurately towards them. They decrease the Altfire rearming delay from 0.2 seconds to 0.01 second, which also decreases the time between being able to lock onto additional targets after the first. They increase the max lock distance from 60 meters to 80 meters and increase the loose lock distance from 80 meters to 100 meters, which also increases the distance you can lock onto targets with Altfire from 60 meters to 80 meters, and your lock won't be lost until the targets move beyond 100 meters. For changes, they did a general polish and cleanup of sounds in the arsenal to remove unintended sounds. Respective rifle and shotgun skins can now be equipped on primary kit guns, including deluxe shotgun skins. Tombfinger and Rattleguts are rifles, and Catchmoon is a shotgun. The Gaze is neither, and as such, it's classified as a beam weapon. They also disabled Ordis's transmissions while in the helmet screen. There is now an incomplete tab on the helmets to show you which abilities you have not subsumed, and they increase the audible distance of Zaku's weapon sounds in the Grasp of Lock ability use. For Marked for Death changes, DE said, "We are changing Marked for Death to start its base damage at 75%, which will cap at 150% with mods, since the damage type in equals damage type out. This will scale well with certain damage types, specifically ones with dots, which is what we envision. Simply put, we're bringing the damage back up." Railjack resources. There will be a reduction in the batches of Railjack resource costs across the board required to yield helmet secretions. The changes are as followed. For the resource Asterite, pre-hotfix it was 5,000, post-hotfix it is 1,500. For Orcrux capacitors, it was 25, now it's down to 10. Brachoid, 1,000 down to 200. Carbides, 10,000 to 2,500. Copernix, 15,000 to 4,000. Cubic diodes, 12,500 to 7,000. Fresnels, 1,000 down to 150. Gallows rods, 300 to 175. Isos, 400 to 200. Keslers, 300 to 100. Comms, 25 to 15. Pustrels, 15,000 to 5,000. Titanium, 20,000 down to 10,000. And Tracons, 10,000 to 1,000. With a note from DE that additionally, anyone with the helmet installed and Railjack owned will receive an inbox of resources after the hotfix goes live that includes the reduced costs. A perfect script is not possible, but a generous grab bag is. If you meet the criteria, you will receive the resources via an inbox after the hotfix date, which has since been released. Moving on, for the helmet system, to give players more options for the bile secretion, we are adding the following components as feedable to helmets to create bile. Anti-serum fragment 900, Javlock capacitor 7, and nav coordinates 65. For general helmet changes, the helmet now shows you a locked status when you sit in the chair with a Warframe whose ability you have already subsumed. For character shader changes, DE have made significant enhancements to pro-based lighting. The results of this are that dynamic objects receive better quality lighting, and metals are more responsive. Additionally, objects should now look more grounded to their environments. For changes, for those of you using DirectX 10, the launcher will now remind you that we're phasing DirectX 10 out in the near future. They removed the gas status effect from the Deimos Jugulus shooting bone glaives, and the deferred rendering display option has been retitled to Graphics Engine. For changes, they added game settings for tweaking dead zone values and other input behavior for controller analog sticks. Each analog stick now has 3 settings as outlined on the Gamepad Warframe website. This should improve the accuracy for movement controls in particular, which previously only used a square dead zone, resulting in inconsistent mapping for diagonal inputs. They also removed the ability to open the helmet screen by fast traveling using the operator mode, which led to issues with your Warframe becoming invisible. They updated Ivara's Quiver, Valbin's Mind Layer, Zarku's The Lost, and Titania's Tribute ability descriptions to list the sub-abilities and a brief general description of what they do. Tips related to these sub-abilities for each Warframe have also been edited for accuracy as a result. They also updated Zephyr's Airburst ability description to include the tap and hold mechanic. For changes, they added a game setting to use the Legacy Dead Zone remapping when controlling look and aim input using the controller analog sticks, and they changed the Dead Zone settings to go up and down by 1 instead of 5 when pressing the arrows. And they reduced the Isolation Vault bounty toxicity phase from 3 minutes to 1 minute 30, with the note from DE that this was meant to release with Deimos Arcana, but it's a low ad risk for now. They also said feedback alluded to this phase not offering much variety within the bounty, so we've shortened it to get you to the meat of the bounty quicker. The helmet subsume confirmation prompt will now show the former count on the respected Warframe, and they increased the default analog stick dead zone values to 20%, with a note that the value was previously 15 only for look and aim inputs, but then was changed to 15 for all analog stick inputs, but this introduced some drift for certain players. Now, as for the changes within the update, the mastery rank icon has been updated with new details to coincide with the UI 3.0 Vitruvian theming. Entrati member names will no longer appear when creator mode is enabled. DE have clarified the daily standing bar value by adding the word remaining to it. They've also adjusted the Night Hunter Syandana wing spread idle animation slightly based on its creator's feedback. They've also removed the Latrox Une from the simulacrum, and in the follow-up hotfix of 29.3.0.1, DE increased accuracy and reduced the recoil of the primary Catchmoon kit gun when used with the Tremor and Steady Slam grips. As quote, "This change was planned for the upcoming infested kit guns, but needed to squeak in early for the Riven disposition changes." Also in update 29.3, DE has reduced the game's overall size on your hard drive by 8 GB, but it does require a 10.6 GB download. DE has touched up and compressed Warframe's textures, and this is the result, the game's overall size being reduced. In regards to this reduction, they also updated the details on the textures of the game, and there is a before and after on the patch note page. Personally, I can't really see a lot, but maybe you can, and point them out in the comments section. The Baran Prime Ephemera has seen changes and fixes. They've aggressively reduced the required idle times for the dragons to trigger. They enabled energy coloring for the dragon's metal textures, with, as of this update, the primary energy color affecting the dragon's gold. They also increased the scale of the smaller dragons and fixed the Baran Prime Ephemera's effect playing when in the navigation view. The Vitrica has seen changes and fixes as well. Firstly, its blueprint has been added to Samaris' offerings once players complete the Glassmaker boss. They also noticed that players were not aware of the Vitrica's Shockwave feature, which is created on slams, so they improved the effects to make it more visible and added the following description to its existing description. A ground slam will smash nearby glass foes, while sending forward a narrow shockwave to shatter distance ones. A heavy slam sends forth a wider shockwave with greater force. Now they also removed the Vitrica from Conclave, they made improvements towards its slam shockwave effect, and they fixed the weapon and its glass detonation, ignoring Limbo's rift mechanics. Now going to the game's overall changes, they disabled the True Master Font's Relay Blessing for Mastery Rank 30 players, applying to Conclave gameplay. DE increased the resolution and quality of the Heavy Blade Grimestone Cleaver Tenogen skin. They increased the resolution of Teshin's textures, and they improved the look of sprinting and Arcwing missions with your Arc melee weapon equipped to showcase more body movement instead of being rather static. Hotfix 29.5.2 is live on PC, and the first change comes to Steel Essence, rewarded for the Steel Path planet completions. Previously it was 2, now it is 25. Players who have already completed the Steel Path and each planet will be rewarded with the amount they should have received if this change was released when you completed each planet. Moving on to Bone Widow changes. Firing Line now has a force stagger to demobilize enemies hit by its rays. Shield Maiden now has a larger health pool and increased angle of blocking. It's 160 by default and 220 when holding the shield, and Exalted Iron Bride. Exalted Iron Bride now has a base damage value of 1500 at max rank. It has been increased by 500. And lastly, Exalted Iron Bride now has a base critical chance of 45% with a 3 times multiplier. Previously it was 5% and a 1.5 times multiplier. As for the general changes for the game, audio mix tweaks have been added for Cetus. A new piece of art can be seen in the game loading screen. They've lessened the self-stagger range on the Fard's projectile. A waypoint has been added to tranked animals. They've lessened the recoil on the Vermin Splicer kit gun chamber when used with grips that increase damage. They have improved the quality and quantity of the Nexifera spawns in caves, improved the ambient spawn behaviors of Avicia, and they made the machete weapon in Samaris' store accessible to those who had obtained it and sold it by means not considered in this store. 29.5.3 is live in Warframe, and we have conservation changes. They have increased the chance of rarer Nexifera, so the common is now at 67%, previously it was 56%. Uncommon was previously 23%, now it's 28%, and rare has gone from 10% to 17%. They have also noted only one Nexifera spawns at a time, and because they don't have Voam or VAS restrictions like some of the other animal variants, this effectively diluted the table if you were hunting for a specific one. This will provide a bit more variety. Also, a sun transmission will now play when you fail to mimic an animal with your Echo Lure. For infested research bounty changes, they have noted the bonus condition of collect no more than 3 fluid sacks had the most common feedback of being too difficult when trying to reach 25 and 30 marked enemies while using just 3 fluid sacks. We've made some changes to ease the general bounty flow and also provide an improved opportunity to achieve the bonus condition. So, they have increased the fluid sack splash radius to 16 meters, increased enemy reinforcement density while holding a fluid sack, and reduced delay between reinforcements to 1 second while holding a fluid sack for overall faster enemy spawning. For the overall game changes, they have separated kit guns from primary and secondary weapons in the Mastery Breakdown. They have also removed the self-damage from the Orvius's charge projectile. The Deconstructor can no longer equip Volatile Quick Return and Volatile Rebound, with DE noting that Deconstructor projectiles do not have any explosion properties, so the mods did nothing. Glaive melee cancelling will cancel the Ethodia's secondary fire beam in the dual-wield mode. They have changed the Volatile Quick Return 100% blast radius to +3 blast radius, noting that multiplicative radius increases was increasing glaives with a high base radius to higher than intended ranges. Lastly, they changed the default Necromech ramming and hovering controller bindings to crouch for ramming and aim for hovering, noting that player feedback provided insight that pressing and holding hover with the controller removed the ability to aim with the right stick. This issue made air combat difficult on controllers and restricted Necromech gameplay to be on the ground. Moving on, we have Necromech changes. There are 3 polarity slots, Vazarin, and Madurai. They have been added to the Bone Widow Necromech. This was an oversight on DE's part, and it should have come with the launch of the Necromech, similar to the Void Rig. They have noted that if you have already polarized the slots, we'll move your chosen polarity to a universal slot. If you have polarized all 9 slots, you'll be given a former. Necromech summoning is now more forgiving on the Cambion Drift. You should experience less invalid launch points on slopes and inclines and more. Bone Widow's Meat Hook ability will no longer skewer Deimos Carnus and Deimos Saxum due to breaking throwing functionality and overall wonkiness. The enemy Void Rig Necromech Storm Shroud ability no longer provides immunity, but instead provides damage reduction for the duration of the buff. For Cambion Drift excavation changes and fixes, Endless Excavation now requires fewer excavators to be cleared in the Endless Bounty variant for a full squad. It was 5, now it's 3. They have noted that this makes each round a little quicker and allows for enemy escalation to increase a little faster. They have added a 5-second invulnerability period to excavators when deployed, increased the time between excavator deployments from 3 to 5 seconds, and they added an extra 3 seconds on the first excavator to give players more time to prepare for the encounter. Playing. For glaive changes and fixes, the alt fire will now also heavy attack the glaive in the glaive and gun mode. The alt fire will heavy attack at any point during a glaive's flight, noting that before, when a glaive auto-recalled after reaching its distance limit, it could not be detonated during its return. For the game's overall changes, bounty objectives on the free roam missions are now enabled 5 seconds after the bounty vote concludes, allowing players to reach the encounter area and start the objective before all the preamble transmissions complete. The arrival objective transmission will interrupt the preamble if the objective is started before the preamble completes. They have updated the Baran Prime ephemera so the dragon bodies will take the accent tint color, giving you further customization options. You'll now be placed just outside the Necrolis gate upon loading into the Cambion Drift from the star chart, and they noted that we found that due to spawning so far away from the Necrolis was resulting in an inability to join Cambion Drift sessions from the star chart. Nora's volume slider will now also affect the transmission in and out sound. Stalker and Acolytes have been given the fancy boss health bar treatment, and they updated the tooltip message for energy while in the arsenal to read use to cast abilities, instead of use to cast Warframe abilities. Cracks in Deimos bounty changes as well as fixes. They have added A, B, C, D, E markers to fissures to help direct you where to go next. They added a blue waypoint to the emitter carrier to allow all players to know the position of the carrier. For the game changes, they removed the Mend the Family option from the grandmother during the Heart of Deimos quest, which could result in an inability to progress the quest. They increased the projectile speed of the Arcubex, updated some text referring to Arcane derelicts instead of Deimos, and they increased the size of the rear weak point on enemy Necromechs, noting that this should make hitting the Necromechs more consistent with what you see. 29.5.6 is live on PC. We first have Bone Widow ability changes. DE have said that Bone Widow has had a bit of an interactive release. There's all the changes we made post-test cluster weekend, some pretty nasty bug fixes, and now another big round of changes. Feedback regarding Bone Widow's abilities have brought forth the upcoming ability overall changes. We appreciate all the suggestions on our second Necromech thus far. So for Meat Hook, an important raised issue with Bone Widow is being unable to regenerate health, as Bone Widow is geared towards the more tankier focused Necromech in comparison to Void Rig. This change to Meat Hook aims to tackle that head on. Held enemies will lose health over time, and the health lost will be transferred into Bone Widow. Held enemies will also have damage over time applied to them. The drain speed and percentage of health transferred can be upgradable. They have also improved the meat hook's grab to feel sharper and be more consistent, with a note that we found the animation was sliding forward before the grab trigger was enabled, so if the AI was close you would slide past before the grab would ever engage. For Shield Maiden, damage reduction has been added to the shield. Incoming block damage will be reflected back at the target, with a note that damage reflection can be upgraded with level and strength mods. Melee with Shield Maiden will give you access to the shield bash you get with Exalted Iron Bride. For Firing Line. Firing Line needs to work as a better setup to let Exalted Iron Bride shred enemies, and we've ensured its casting leads to better setup opportunities with these changes. They've added the lifted status to enemies hit for 5 seconds, which is upgradable by mods, and a 1.5 times damage multiplier on lifted enemies. For Exalted Iron Bride, Radial Ragdoll has been added to the 3rd melee strike with the ability to critical hit, but not full knockback as to keep enemies contained within striking distance. Exalted Iron Bride now has a slight aim assist that will help prevent overswing. The shield bash has been expanded to work whenever you have a shield equipped, not just when you have a sword and shield. So with a gun and shield it's E, and sword and shield it's the left mouse button. They've also added a lift status effect to Shield Bash. And lastly, for general Bone Widow changes, they have lowered Bone Widow's jump melee strikes by 1 second to improve responsiveness. For the game's overall changes, they have improved support for unusual DirectX 12 video drivers that don't support any full-screen video modes, altered the dialogue timing in the Toxicity, aka the 2nd stage of the Isolation Vault, for better pacing of Lloyd and Otak's dialogue. They also tuned the escalation timing slightly to delay the arrival of higher tier enemies. The hint transmission audio toggle now applies to Glass Fisher transmissions. They rebalance the Necromech efficiency mods so that they do not stack over 100%, with a note that this also applies to both the Necromech Drift mod and Necromech efficiency mod. Necromech Drift max rank is now 60% hover efficiency, and Necromech efficiency max rank is now 30% engine efficiency. Combined, you will receive a maximum of 90%, with an additional note that Necromech efficiency mods boost the efficiency of all stamina affecting maneuvers to 60% at max rank, which leaves little room to expand with other mods. When combined with hover efficiency, which already caps out at a problematic 125% efficiency, we get some really undesired values. We missed the mark on balancing these before they were pushed out the door, which is our mistake. They also increased the standing rank font size of standing rank up from 18 to 19 to make it standard and hopefully fix occasionally displaying a blank square instead of a number. They improved the Railjack inventory slot flow for more exposure and overall clarity, where they also changed wreckage capacity count to use an icon instead of the text and scrap button. They added an additional button for combined components and armaments to show components and armament capacity and allow you to scrap multiple at the same time using the dedicated scrap window. And lastly, they adjusted reverb sound settings to the color key captura scene to better fit the level. So, as of Hotfix 29.5.7, DE have made the following changes and fixes. Quote, "On today's menu, we have a hearty serving of Bone Widow changes and fixes. Let's break down the nutritional facts here. The Arquebex is a very high damage weapon for Voidrig, as it makes sense for his damage output kit. Bone Widow is our melee necromech more focused on survivability and endurance. Exalted Iron Bride is not going to match one-on-one with the Arquebex, but that doesn't mean Iron Bride or the rest of her kit should be overshadowed. The below aim is to address the common community feedback to provide Bone Widow that extra dash of spice. So what they're doing, Necromech melee mods, Pressure Point, Fury and Reach will now apply to Exalted Iron Bride. They've renamed Bone Widow's Shield Maiden's Shield Bash to Maiden's Kiss. They reduced Bone Widow's Maiden Kiss to cost 15 energy. Bone Widow's Meat Hook thrown enemies now have a 100% status chance. The Meat Hook now drains a percent of the target's max health versus flat damage, with a note that when the target is thrown, the damage dealt is a percentage of the target's current health. Both of these changes help to scale the Meat Hook with varying enemy levels. The Bone Widow Necromech can now reflect damage while blocking with Shield Maiden, which is exclusive to the player's version of Bone Widow. Bone Widow will now absorb enemy attacks for a few seconds after activating Shield Maiden, and the absorbed damage will be added to the shield's health. Enemy Bone Widow Shield Maidens now have a limited amount of health and can be destroyed. Enemy Bone Widows will no longer reattach their arms while wielding Exalted Iron Bride, with the note by DE, one thing at a time. They have removed MOUI when Bone Widow is wielding Iron Bride. Now for the Void Rig changes and fixes, DE have doubled the enemy Void Rig recovery animation time to allow a longer opportunity window to shoot the weak spots. For general Necromech changes and fixes, firing your gun while hovering as a Necromech is now considered to be in an aiming state, meaning mods like Critical Focus and Marked Target will apply again. And for the game's overall changes, you can now build kit guns at Father in the Necrolist, and Guild provide or title your kit gun. They have extended the context action range of the bait console when grabbing the key during an Isolation Vault bounty to help prevent sliding past it or standing on top of it. Little Blue Necromech and Little Blue Warframe helmet icons now mark your Necromech and Warframe respectively on the minimap when not being controlled, in order to aid in loss prevention. They reduced Necros' Soul Punch area of effect physics impulse, so it no longer launches enemies across the solar system. They improved stability with third-party overlays and injection tools, that being Steam Overlay, OBS, Discord, FPS counters, etc. Improvements to Corpus ship level navigation were made where AI could get stuck. Running out of Railjack boost stamina will now clear the boost state to address boost not recharging once depleted. Lastly, they lowered Zaku's Grasp of Lock ability sounds. 29.5.8 is live on PC, and it has made a quick change with remove the 25 Grandmother token cost to guild items at Father, and they have replaced it with 25 Father tokens as originally intended. They have noted that a script has been run to refund those who were impacted by this change. Isolation and Arcana bounty flow changes were also made with this hotfix. We have 4 main pillars of Isolation Vault flow changes. Not only do these changes significantly loosen the required routine, but they also aim to further improve the process for less new player confusion. 1. You will now only ever need to complete a specific tier of Isolation Bounty once to unlock the next tier. For example, complete the Tier 1 Isolation Vault near the Necrolist gates, you can then leave Deimos or even log off, and the next time you return to the Cambion Drift you can go immediately to the Tier 2 Isolation Vault bounty location and run that bounty. There's no need to run the Tier 1 bounty again if you don't want to. Point 2. Once the Isolation Vault tier is completed, you can run the Arcana bounty at the same tier. Similar to the new Isolation Vault flow above, you can leave the session, and upon returning to the Cambion Drift you can go straight into the Arcana bounty without first completing the Isolation Vault at that location. 3. Each Isolation Vault bounty tier now has a specific mother location in the Cambion Drift to provide a concrete flow with less confusion. Tier 1 is in the Undulatum, Tier 2 is between Albrecht's Prospect and Catabolic Gutter, and Tier 3 is at the Abscess. Point 4. All 3 tiers of Isolation Vault bounties are now available from the Mother within the Necrolist. For Isolation Vault and Arcana bounty drop table changes. Now that the Arcana bounties will be more easily accessible, it's time to rebalance the drop tables. 1. Both Isolation Vault bounties and Arcana bounties now share a drop table. There are 3 different drop tables for each Isolation and Arcana bounty tier that rotates every 3 hours, allowing you to selectively choose the reward you seek and when, exactly how the other open world bounties work. This rotation follows the same window as the bounty rotation in the Necrolist. Point 2. Rewards within the Isolation Vault and Arcana bounties have been rebalanced to provide a better kick at the can for higher coveted rewards. They have shared the drop table content breakdown. Oricon Matrixes have a less % chance overall. Relics have a midpoint percentage between the 2 old bounty types. Necromech weapon parts now split up among the 3 drop tables so you can target them. Necromech mods have a similar drop chance, but are now split up to allow more targeted runs. Deimos Arcanes have a significantly higher drop percent chance. Scintillant in Tier 1 has a midpoint drop percent chance between the two old bounty types, and weapon parts in Tier 2 and Tier 3 have slightly reduced, with DE noting that you only ever need one of the Sporothrix and Aurum Spinosa blueprint. Getting all the way to the Arcana bounties and receiving another weapon blueprint is not a feel-good moment. Although this doesn't completely eliminate getting duplicates, the drop percent reduction does allow for better chances towards other rewards. They have removed two items from the drop tables, which are rare Deimos gems and Endo, as both of these have been taken out to allow for better odds at getting newer and desired rewards. They have noted that as a bonus, the Sporothrix and Aurum Spinosa blueprints are now tradable. With this update focusing on Necromechs, we do have Necromech changes and fixes. Bone Widow's Iron Bride can now do a neutral and forward heavy attack that throws a damaging projectile. You can now control the direction of Bone Widow's meat hook ability instead of being stuck in the initial direction before activating. You can now mix and match Necromech helmets on both Bone Widow and Void Rig in the arsenal. Void Rig and Bone Widow are available in the market as well as their corresponding weapons. Void Rig and Bone Widow both cost 375 platinum each, and their Necromech weapons cost 250 platinum each. Moving on, fully crafted components for the Necromech and weapons are now tradable. They have removed the Gravamag requirement on Arcwing weapons for Necromechs. Vazarin's Dash, Trinity's Blessing, Equinox's Mend, the Rejuvenate Aura and Arcane Pulse can no longer heal Necromechs, with a note from DE that out of 21 sources of healing, these 5 slipped through. Necromechs now transition to the aiming pose faster when in the air. As for the game's overall changes, DE have replaced weapon blueprint requirements in Necroloid Sacrifices with the associated barrel component blueprint, thus removing the mastery rank restriction on advancing ranks. The Basmu and the Seti Lacero blueprints are now tradable. Inbox messages with transmissions now have a replay button that pulses. A mastery rank requirements pop-up will now show when trying to purchase a weapon you're not eligible for yet, and Banshee Prime Systems blueprint has been changed from rare to uncommon. The following are the Isolation Vault and Arcana bounty changes and fixes. DE have rebalanced Isolation Vault rewards to account for corrected behavior, where the base Isolation Vault was not dropping from all possible rewards, DE noting. To break down the issue, from the changes in 29.5.9, you would get one reward for completing the whole Isolation Vault, and the one it gives you is from the bin matching the difficulty of the Isolation Vault. So, a Tier 1 Isolation Vault could only roll from the Commons bin. Tier 2 could only roll from the Uncommons, and Tier 3 from the Rares. The Isolation Vault bounties now combine all 3 newly balanced tiers. They have removed the unintentional 2,500 Endo reward from the possible Isolation Vault rewards. This video concludes my coverage of Update 27.2's patch notes by covering the damage and status changes. Before I get to those though, there are a few minor changes to begin. DE have cleared low end count rewards such as 15 Endo and 50 Endo from drop pools, but they have kept the high low end rewards such as 80 Endo. This doesn't just apply to Endo but to credit caches too. Sentinel weapons can now use the exact same mods that you use on your weapons, so there is no longer a confliction. Titania has been updated to have 100 armor. You can now hold the Spellbind cast to receive its immunity for yourself. Tribute now has a gear wheel to select which buff to cast. Lantern is now static, and Razorwing has been updated to a new flight model to be in line with Skywing. Razorwing also received an effect update. Corrosive Projection, Shield Disruption, and Infested Impotence now have minus 18% stats applied to their respected faction debuff when at rank 5. Status chance mods, those being Rifle Aptitude, Melee Prowess, Sure Shot, and Shotgun Savvy, all offer plus 90% status chance to their respected weapon type. The infested enemies have received a melee damage buff, and enemy AI accuracy no longer scales based on their level. Self-damage has been removed entirely from Warframe, and its replacement comes in the form of the stagger system. The severity of the stagger will vary based on the weapon used, so keep that in mind. The staggers come in the form of a simple animation, a reload cancelling animation, all the way up to a recovery animation that will lock your movement. The recovery animation does have a short window of opportunity to exit, indicated by a pulse around your Warframe. It is a very small opportunity and you will need to use your jump key to execute it. This window has been added to all knockdowns in Warframe, plus DE have made it so we'll need to manually move in order to get back up from any knockdowns we experience. The recovery and stagger system has also been added to non-self-damage area of effect weapons alongside, at the time of the update's release, 90% damage fall-off. The fall-off also applies to all area of effect weapons. The fall-off has since been adjusted per weapon thanks to a hotfix, which I'll cover later. Any mods that reference or affect self-damage have been converted to reference or affect staggers. It should also be mentioned that Cautious Shot has been changed to be rifle compatible, including the use on bows. No damage buffs were made to explosive weapons that previously dealt self-damage, but all area of effect weapons have had their range increased by 20%. Enemy armor, health, and shields have been changed so that it no longer scales exponentially, and now scales on an S curve. This means enemies will be less tanky at higher levels than they were before. Players no longer have any debuffs applied to them since DE made a Tenno health, armor, and shield type that at the moment of the update's launch has no negatives. We do have one positive, and that comes in the form of taking 25% less damage to our shields. We also have a 1 second recharge delay for our shields if our shields are partially damaged, and a 4 second recharge delay if our shields were completely depleted. Shield gating has launched for both us the player and enemy units with shields. In regards to the player, we will not take any health damage from a shot that would have previously one-shot us, if our shields are of course up. Now when hit with said shot, our shields will now deplete, we'll have a brief moment of invulnerability, and no damage will come to our health from that shot. It should also be mentioned that enemy slash procs as well as our own no longer bypass shields. As for enemy units, the same system applies, but instead of immunity to one-hit knockouts, 5% of the damage we dealt to a unit's shield will penetrate and damage their health. A headshot, or weak point shot, will bypass the shield gate mechanic on enemies. Now the Toxin status effect will continue to bypass shields, but as stated before, the slash status effect does not. The following Warframes had their armors buffed to the stated value. Ash now has 100 armor, Ash Prime 175, Banshee 100, Banshee Prime 125, Baruch 175. Ember 125, Ember Prime 150, Equinox 125, Equinox Prime 150, Gara 150, and Gauss 175. Harrow 175, Hydroid 225, Hydroid Prime 275, Inaros 225, Ivara 100, Ivara Prime 125, and Limbo 100. Limbo Prime 125, Loki 100, Loki Prime 125, Mag 100, Mag Prime 125, Mesa 100, and Mesa Prime 125. Mirage's armor is now 100, Mirage Prime 125, Necros 100, Necros Prime 125, Nezha 190, and Nova 100. Nova Prime is at 125, Nyx 100, Nyx Prime 125, Oberon 175, Octavia 150, Revenant 125, Rhino 225, Trinity 100, Trinity Prime 125, Valbin 150, Valbin Prime 200, Vault 100, and Wisp 175. Lastly, Zephyr has 100 armor, and Zephyr Prime's armor is now 125. Weapons with status chance above 100% will now have a chance to proc 2 status effects on a shot, with 200% status chance guaranteeing a double proc. DE have added a multi-shot UI stat to the arsenal display, separating it from the stat for status. The status chance for shotguns has been increased by 3 times, with status chance per pellet displayed as a stat in the UI. Status on shotguns has also received new calculations, which means 100% status chance will no longer provide a major improvement. Now to finish with the status and damage type changes. DE have removed the impact, puncture, and slash proc weighting, which means all status effects now have the same chance to proc. With this update, you can also now stack multiple procs for improved status effects. The amount of stacks will appear alongside the unit's name and above its health bar. The slash status effect will no longer bypass shields and will now only bypass armor. Each status effect has its own duration, and the UI will display 10 stats even though more occur. The impact status effect now staggers enemies more so than before, and with each added impact proc onto an enemy, they will progress further through the stagger process, eventually at 5 procs getting knocked down. As of recording this script, DE have stated changes will be coming to the impact status effect due to feedback about the knockdown. The puncture status effect reduces the enemy's damage by 30%, with each added proc decreasing their damage by 5%, with it capping at minus 75% damage dealt. Each puncture status will last for 6 seconds. The cold status effect will slow an enemy by 25%, with each added cold proc increasing the slow by 5%, up to a total of 70% at 10 cold procs. Each cold status effect will last for 6 seconds. Heat has seen no changes with this revision, due to it recently receiving an update. The Toxin status effect, as mentioned earlier, will continue to bypass shields, and each proc will last for 6 seconds. They also stated that the 25% bonus to armor has been removed. The Electric status effect's AoE damage can now reoccur and be stacked via more procs. The Blast status effect will now reduce the enemy's accuracy by 30%, and with each new proc, the accuracy debuff will increase by 5% to a maximum debuff of 75% at 10 procs. Each Blast status effect will last for 6 seconds. The Corrosive status effect will now strip 26% of the unit's armor, and with each new proc, the armor debuff will increase by 6% to a maximum armor strip debuff of 80% at 10 procs. Each Corrosive status effect will last 8 seconds. The Radiation status effect will now make affected enemies deal 100% damage to their allies, with each added proc increasing their damage output by 50% up to a maximum of 550% damage to their allies. Each Radiation status effect will last 12 seconds. The Magnetic status effect will deal 100% additional damage to shields, with each added proc increasing the damage output by 25% up to a total of 325% additional shield damage. When an enemy is affected by the Magnetic status effect, the enemy's shield can no longer regenerate. Each Magnetic status effect will last 6 seconds. The Viral status effect will now deal 100% additional damage to health, with each added proc increasing the damage output by 25% up to a maximum of 325% additional health damage. Lastly, the Gas status effect no longer deals Toxin status effects on its area of effect clouds, as the clouds now deal gas damage. Each Gas status effect will last 6 seconds. Area of effect weapons have had their radial damage fall-off changed, and radial stats including fall-off and range have been added to the arsenal for these weapons. The Cyanex has a fall-off of 20%, the Kuva Shakur, Astilla, Zuge Prime, Kuva Seer, Stug, Tomb Finger, the Granmu Prism, and the Exiled Scaffold, plus the basic attack for the Staticor, Javeloc, and Scourge have a fall-off of 30%. The Batacor, Ferox, Comorex, Angstrom, Prisma Angstrom, Kastanas, Sancti Kastanas, Shraksung Scaffold, Fard Scaffold, and the Colstar have a fall-off of 40%. The Mutilus, Quanta, Penta, Exceltra, Zar, Phantasma, Pox, Talons, Grattler, Kuvaranga, and all Glaives have a fall-off of 50%. The Opticore and Opticore Vandal, Secura Penta, Cyanoid, Cyanoid Simulor, Shadoo, Larkspur, Disic Scaffold, plus the alternate fires for the Javeloc and Scourge have a fall-off of 60%. The Tonkor, Kuva Tonkor, Lens, Icarius, and the Proper Scaffold have a fall-off of 70%. The Ogress and Kuva Ogress have a fall-off of 80%, and the Staticor's alternate fire alongside the Corinth and Kuva Brahma remain with a 90% radial damage fall-off. Update 27.3's general changes now follow. Gunblades have had their status chance increased to match the shotgun status chance values. The Redeemer now has a fall-off range of 10 to 20 meters, and the Redeemer Prime has a fall-off range of 10 to 30 meters. The Rakta Dark Dagger will no longer generate shields if the player doesn't have any. Atlas and his passive blocks staggers from stagger-dealing weapons. Status effects. The Impact status effect will no longer knock down units with more procs, and instead places them into heavy staggers, capping at a total of 5 procs. Each new impact proc will also increase the chance of a Parazon finisher window opening by 10%. The gas status proc clouds will remain active for the standard duration even after the unit the effect procced on had died. Each new gas proc on a target will also increase its cloud range, with the maximum range capping at 10 stacks. DE have also removed the gas resistance to allies granted by toxic ancients and their aura. The Hammershot mod now has a status chance of 80%, the Shattering Justice mod has a status chance of 90%, and it has been changed to multiplicative. Also, the Stunning Speed mod now has a status chance of 30%. This video continues my coverage of the update patch notes by covering the finalized Arcane changes. DE has removed the ability to equip 2 of the same Arcane on a single item, and this does mean you can no longer equip Arcane Grace twice on an Inaros and more. You can now dismantle any ranked Arcanes at no cost to receive the individual amounts that rank required as shown. DE has added cooldowns to a number of Arcanes, and an indicator will now appear on the Arcanes that can be refreshed during use at the Arcane selection screen. The max rank has been increased to 5, with Arcane Revives being applied at rank 3. You will need 21 of the same Arcane to reach rank 5, and DE in a previous developer workshop and dev stream stated that the rank 5 Arcanes are generally 1.5 times their base power. The Arcane Management screen now has a sorting tab for incomplete Arcane, and it should be noted that an upcoming event by the name of Scarlet Spear will feature a shop that will offer each Arcane in the game for the event currency. The changes to the normal Arcanes do follow, but if you want to know about the changes to Operator Magus Arcanes, there is a timestamp on your screen to that portion, but it does literally follow this reading. Also, these Arcanes are rank 5, so those are the stats that I'm reading. Arcane Acceleration. Upon landing a critical hit, you'll have a 30% chance for a 90% fire rate increase on primary weapons for 9 seconds. Arcane Aegis. Upon your shields being damaged, you'll have a 3% chance for a 30% shield recharge increase for 12 seconds. Arcane Agility. Upon being damaged, you'll have a 60% chance for a 60% parkour velocity increase for 18 seconds. Arcane Arachne. Upon wall latching, you'll have an increase of 150% damage for 30 seconds, but this Arcane now has a cooldown, so it won't reproc during that cooldown period. Arcane Avenger. Upon being damaged, you'll have a 21% chance to get a 45% critical chance increase for 12 seconds. Arcane Awakening. Upon reloading, you'll have a 60% chance to get a 150% damage increase to your pistols for 24 seconds. Arcane Barrier. Upon your shields being damaged, you'll have a 6% chance to instantly restore all of your shields. Arcane Blade Charger. Upon killing an enemy with a primary weapon, you'll get a 30% chance for an increase of 300% to your melee damage for 12 seconds. Arcane Bodyguard. Upon getting 6 melee kills within 30 seconds, you'll heal your companions for 900 health. Arcane Consequence. Upon landing a headshot, you'll be guaranteed an increase of 60% to your parkour velocity for 18 seconds. Arcane Deflection will now give you immunity to the Slash status effect. Arcane Healing will give you immunity to the Radiation status effect. Arcane Ice will give immunity to the Heat status effect. Arcane Nullifier will give immunity to the Magnetic status effect. Arcane Resistance will give immunity to the Toxin status effect, and Arcane Warmth will give immunity to the Cold status effect. Arcane Eruption. Upon picking up an energy orb, will knock down nearby enemies. Arcane Energize. Upon picking up an energy orb, will have a 60% chance to provide extra energy instantly to yourself and nearby allies. Arcane Energize will continue to proc while using channeled or toggled abilities like Exalted Blade. Also, Arcane Energize now has a cooldown that will stop it from reprocking again for a short duration. Arcane Grace. Upon your health being damaged, will have a 9% chance to grant plus 6% health regeneration for 9 seconds. Arcane Grace now has a cooldown that will stop it from reprocking while active. Arcane Fury. Upon landing a critical hit, will have a 60% chance to increase your melee damage by 180% for 18 seconds. Arcane Guardian. Upon being damaged, will have a 15% chance to increase your armor by 900 for 20 seconds. Arcane Momentum. Upon landing a critical hit, will have a 60% chance for a 150% reload speed increase to sniper rifles for 12 seconds. Arcane Phantasm. Upon parrying, you'll have a 45% chance to get a 60% speed increase for 18 seconds. Arcane Pistolier. Upon getting a headshot kill with pistols, you'll have a 60% chance to get 102% ammo efficiency for 12 seconds, but this does have a cooldown. Arcane Precision. Upon landing a headshot, you'll have a guaranteed chance for a 300% damage increase to your pistols for 18 seconds, but this now has a cooldown. Arcane Primary Charger, upon getting a melee kill, will have a 30% chance to give you a 300% primary weapon increase for 12 seconds. Arcane Pulse has received increased stats and will, upon picking up a health orb, have a 60% chance to heal the player and nearby allies. Arcane Pulse now has a cooldown. Arcane Rage, upon landing a headshot, now has a 15% chance for a 180% primary weapon damage increase for 24 seconds. Arcane Strike, upon landing a melee hit, has a 15% chance to increase your attack speed by 60% for 18 seconds. Arcane Tanker, upon equipping your arc gun, will grant you 1200 armor for 60 seconds. Arcane Tempo, upon landing a critical hit, has a 15% chance to increase your shotgun fire rate by 90% for 12 seconds. Arcane Trickery, upon executing a finisher, has a 15% chance to become invisible for 30 seconds. Arcane Ultimatum, upon executing a finisher, is guaranteed to grant 1200 armor for 45 seconds. Arcane Velocity, upon landing a critical hit, has a 90% chance to increase your pistol's fire rate by 120% for 9 seconds. Lastly, for the standard arcanes, there is Arcane Victory. Arcane Victory, upon getting a headshot kill, will have a 75% chance for plus 3% health regeneration for 9 seconds. The changes to Operator Magus Arcanes follow. Magus Accelerant on Void Blast will reduce enemy resistance to heat damage by 65%. Magus Anomaly on Transference in, enemies within 30 meters are pulled towards the Warframe. Magus Cadence on Void Dash will have a 100% chance for a 90% sprint speed increase for 12 seconds. Magus Cloud on Void Mode will increase your Void Dash radius by 300% for 6 seconds. Magus Destruct on Void Blast will reduce the enemy's resistance to puncture damage by 65%. Magus Drive on Transference in will increase K-Drive speed by 150% for 30 seconds. Magus Elevate on Transference in has a 95% chance to restore 300 health to the Warframe. Magus Firewall on Void Mode will generate void particles every 1 second up to a cap of 6 particles. Each particle will grant 12.5% damage reduction for 60 seconds, but taking damage will consume a particle. Magus Glitch on Transference Static will negate Transference Static. Magus Husk on Transference Out will give 150 armor. Magus Lockdown on Void Dash will drop a mine that tethers up to 10 enemies within 15 meters. After 4 seconds, it will explode, dealing 60% of their health as puncture damage. Magus Melt on Void Dash will increase heat damage in Operator Mode by 20% for 15 seconds, stacking up to 7 times. Magus Nourish on Transference Out will restore 35 health a second to the Warframe. Magus Overload on Void Blast will stun robotic enemies for 3 seconds, which then discharge electricity damage, dealing 80% of their max health to anyone within 25 meters. Magus Repair on Void Mode will heal Warframes within 30 meters by 25% health. Magus Replenish on Void Mode is guaranteed to heal 30% health. Magus Revert on Void Dash, when used again within 3 seconds, will return the operator to their original position at no energy cost and restoring 60 health, but it has a cooldown of 3 seconds. Lastly, to end the video, Magus Vigor on Transference Out will give 300 health. Now, Arcane UI changes follow. The term Distill has been updated to Break Down. Tips have been added for breaking down arcanes, arcanes that refresh, and how to obtain certain arcanes. When active, arcanes will display their own arcane icon in-game. The rank up callout is now displayed to the left of the next arcane rank when using a controller. Arcanes that are sold in vendor offerings will now only show as max rank in the tooltip information, and they've also added a UI indication that the arcane you're purchasing is unranked. DE also noted that this fixes the arcane tooltips appearing off the screen when viewed in the offering screen. They also clarified arcane requirements for Arcane Trickery, Ultimatum, and Exodium Might by adding the word kill to the on finisher line. As with the past 2 patch note videos, the following changes are Railjack specific in order of hotfix appearance. In 27.0.9, DE lowered the armor of fighters after they stated, enemy fighters in Railjack have too much armor. All fighter armor values have been halved with a slight boost in health for non-elites to compensate. This change was made after an upcoming explanation was given prior to the hotfix's release. The following are the value changes for armor. The Fluk went from 300 to 150, the Elite Fluk went from 350 to 175, Tactus went from 250 to 125, Elite Tactus 350 to 175, the Cutter went from 250 to 125, Elite Cutter went from 300 to 150, Outrider went from 800 to 300, and the Elite Outrider went from 800 to 400. The following are the value changes for health. So the Fluk went from 250 up to 375, the Tactus went from 200 to 300, and the Cutter went from 200 to 300. As for that explanation, Railjack weapons are no longer affected by Warframe abilities such as Rhino's Roar and Saren's Lash. DE did state that this was unintentional, with DE Marcus explaining. Few Warframe abilities unintentionally work on the Railjack itself. Bringing a meta Warframe to Railjack weapons is not a design outcome we intended. Our goal here is to balance so that players don't feel the need to use Rhino's Roar. Railjack weapons should feel powerful on their own. Moving on though, avionics now have a chance to drop from the following elite fighters in deep space, and avionics are now permanently marked when they drop. Munitions Vortex drops from Elite Exo Tactus and Elite Gaia Tactus. Countermeasures drop from Elite Exo Tactus, Elite Cosma Cutters, and Elite Gaia Cutters. Blackout Pulse drops from Elite Exo Tactus, Particle Ram, Fiery Phoenix, and Seeker Volley drops from Elite Exo Cutters, and Tether, Shatterburst, and Void Hole drop from Elite Exo Fluk. In regard to Void Hole, DE noted that having added Void Hole to that unit, it should make it easier to acquire, but they will continue to watch all drops in the case they need further changes. In regards to weapons and procs, DE stated, the idea of one damage type to rule them all is one we want to avoid in Railjack's early days. We are rebalancing aspects of certain damage types to ensure there's balanced choices. The armor changes in conjunction with this means this is a combined effort to finding the right place for all damage types, not just one leader. With that said, they decreased the effectiveness of the particle proc but increased its duration. By reducing it to 7.5% damage bonus per hit, it still stacks and lasts 20 seconds. They increased the effectiveness of the incendiary proc by doubling the damage per tick, but it has half the duration. The Pulsar series received an increased base damage by about 10% and an increased fall-off range. The Photor series received an increased fall-off range, the Cryophon series received reduced damage and an increased fall-off range, and the Zetki House received reduced heat accretion for all Zetki weapon variants apart from the Cryophon. Now DE removed the Rush Repair drone from the market with this hotfix, but it does continue to remain as an end of mission reward. DE, outside of the Devstream 135 comment by Steve, said, "We are doing this based on feedback that as a purchasing option it feels too unfair of an advantage. While it technically abides by our rule of pay for time, it bypasses a huge segment of the Railjack resource value. You can still pay to rush repairs once you've contributed resources, but you can no longer outright bypass the entire experience by purchasing the item from the market. We will continue to use rush repair drones as a reward, just not as a market item." DE has doubled the chance of obtaining wreckage from the end of mission rewards, but they reduced the chance of obtaining relics to compensate for the change. Permanent markers have been added to the avionics and salvage when they drop, with DE adding. This will allow you to always know what remains on the field of battle, and how to navigate accordingly. Adding awareness to the important loot has been a huge request, and this visibility increase should make sure no loot is left behind. Aside, we are reviewing vacuum range. Asterite resource pickups now reward twice as much. The squad overlay is now visible when in various Railjack modes, whether it be pilot, gunner, or whatever. They added squad status icons for Railjack missions in the squad overlay that indicate what the player is doing. Intrinsic points can no longer be earned after you have maxed out every intrinsic, and DE has cleared the points of players who had stockpiled theirs after maxing them out. The Railjack minimap is now fully visible. They have better canted the Railjack Pilot HUD Diamond, added force feedback to all weapons and missile launchers, they increased the brightness and thickness of enemy markers in Railjack, updated the Railjack name placement of all skins for better visibility, they set the maximum length of Railjack names to 50, and the off-screen enemy markers in Arcwing now show awareness states. In 27.0.10, players will now have 3 seconds of invulnerability when exiting the Railjack or a point of interest. They increase the refund from scrapping repaired wreckage to 80% from 50%. Wreckage capacity now appears in the equip screen for components and armaments, allowing you to see how many you currently own while scrapping. Distance values on Railjack enemies will now be displayed once their name is visible, and they upgraded the art quality for certain Grineer installations in Railjack missions. In 27.0.11, they brought buffs to all reactor types found in the wild. DE stated that any existing gear you have will simply be adjusted for avionic capacity, which will automatically be a buff in all cases. However, they did note that the Vidar 3's range has been compressed significantly from a 30% to 100 range to the new 90 to 100 range, and that they kept your stats the same if your rolls were within the 90 to 100 range prior to the change. So, for the Levan reactors, Mark 1's avionic capacity went from 10 to 20 to 20 to 30. Mark 2's went from 10 to 40 to 50 to 60. And Mark 3 Levan reactors now have a range of 80 to 90, up from 20 to 70, which was previously 20 to 70. For Vidar reactors, Mark 1's went from 10 to 25 to 30 to 40. Mark 2's went from 20 to 50 to 60 to 70. And Mark 3's went from 30 to 100 to 90 to 100. And then the Zekti reactors, Mark 1's went from 5 to 10 to 10 to 20. Mark 2's went from 5 to 30 to 40 to 50. And lastly, Mark 3 Zetki reactors went from 10 to 50 to 70 to 80. With these changes, it's important to note how we got from point A to B. When initially setting up the avionic values of these rewards, we did not foresee the depth of the frustration the Rangers caused, but in hindsight we should have. Thanks to your feedback, we are able to confidently make broad and major buffs across the board. This hotfix also did remove the Tenorus ephemera from the reinforced sentient containers aboard the Sentient Anomaly in the Vale Proxima region, and according to DE, this was done because the drop method caused numerous issues in terms of connectivity, stability, and player frustration. A quick jump forward, in 27.0.12, the ephemera did return to the game via the new exotic vendor of Little Duck, who sells the ephemera for 15 anomaly shards, as well as all sentient capturicines for 10 anomaly shards each in Fortuna. This hotfix also removed the sentient capturicines from the drop tables, and it's now exclusively from Little Duck's exotic shop. As for how to acquire anomaly shards, a single shard can be earned with each completion of the anomaly in the Vale Proxima region. We go back to 27.0.11 for the following. Affinity gained from all Omni-Tool repairs and forge actions aboard the Railjack now get shared with the squad even if they are outside the ship. Wreckage no longer auto-scraps when you are over the wreckage capacity, and instead shows a prompt upon returning to the dry dock that informs you that you are over capacity and that you have to clean up your wreckage so that it's under the limit before you can start another Railjack mission. Wreckage can now be cancelled at the funding point or while in construction, with invested resources and the wreckage returned to the player for another decision, whether you scrap it after that or whatever. The base avionics are now at rank 1. To accommodate for that change, DE has increased the base stat and drain for the Vidar Predator and lowered the drain for both Vidar Winged Steel and Vidar Winged Force. Numerous UI changes were made in the name of organization and clarity on the Railjack research and configure screens as well. With that said, they added mark category tabs to the Railjack research screen to better sort and display your growing inventory of research, added categories, a search bar, and sort options to the Railjack components and armament screens, added a show equip and show ranked option in the avionic scrap screen. The battle and tactical avionic grids now have grid category icons, and in addition, when picking a battle grid, they now reinforce which grid you are selecting and viewing for avionics by showing the category name and icon. As for the other changes, hull breaches that are active when the mission succeeds will be fixed automatically. They increase the range of Winged Cyclone, Winged Force, Winged Steel, and Winged Storm to 1000 meters. They increase the mount animation speed for the Arcwing Slingshot and Winged Turrets, and they tone down the effects for both the Particle Ram and the Fiery Phoenix Battle Avionic when aboard the Railjack. The screens and orange circle above the forge will be on when the forge is ready for use, and off if the forge is busy. DE also reduced the brightness of the cruise ship healing bubble burst effect, changed the Railjack entrance UI marker to use the same blue as the Railjack marker in mission, refining in the forge bay where the controller now requires you to hold X for 1 second instead of simply clicking X, and the open squads line now appears at the bottom of the star chart. Now we move on to 27.0.12. As for this hotfix, loot gathered when on foot in a point of interest, cruise ship, and from killing a boarding party are now shared between the whole squad, so you don't individually need to go to collect loot if you're busy. But this change excludes health, ammo, and energy pickups, and AFK players do not get the items shared and cannot pick them up later, so there's that. Coming back to it, minor breaches, fires, and electrical traps now restore health once again when a catastrophic failure breach is active. They added tips to the configure Railjack screen in the dojo. Avionics and wreckage dropped in Railjack missions will now display a distance marker, and the distance marker will appear when the avionic or wreckage is near the center of the screen, regardless of how far it is. They also updated the components and armament slots description to clarify that they do not apply to wreckage, only wreckage repaired. For the Railjack changes, the Omni tool is now a gear item, so you can choose where in your gear wheel you'd like to place it. They increased the maximum power for the Zetki Predator avionic to 80. The show equipped option will now show ranked avionics that are equipped even when the show ranked option is disabled. Hijacked cruise ships now start the reactor meltdown sequence when they reach 0 health. Ordnance weapon icons now become translucent while in cooldown and will reflect a timer icon to better indicate its current cooldown state. And they also changed the Railjack engine component rating stats from kilometers per hour to meters per second. The Railjack payload screen will now show the total ordnance ammo you have in your account when you're in the dry dock to make it clear that you aren't wasting anything if you craft more than your Railjack can carry. DE has reduced the resource requirements to build your Railjack throughout the Rising Tide quest. For players who had already built their Railjack prior to the release of the update, you will get the differences between the cost returned via an inbox message, alongside 2 rush repair drones. For players who are currently in the process of building their Railjacks, when you log in, you will get the new resource requirements on the next stage and any old costs refunded to you. You'll also get a single rush repair drone. For those who have not started the research, you'll just have the updated resource requirements. No added bonus. The Chimera Prologue and Era quests can now be played via the New War Quest tab in the Codex, and if you have not played them before, you will get the weapon blueprints tied to their completion, which does mean for the Era quest, you can get the Shadow blueprint without needing to go to Vale Proxima, going to the Anomaly, and breaking the Shard. DE have added a new cruise ship to the Vale Proxima missions under the title Exo Skuld Cruise Ship. According to the patch notes, it's a variant of an existing ship, that being the Gokstad, but it has an impenetrable shield that you'll need to figure out how to take down. A Forge All button has been added to the payload screen at the Drydock terminal. Both the intrinsic and avionic screens no longer use hold to confirm and now require you to confirm via a prompt. Any avionics that are applied to your Railjack that exceed capacity will now appear crossed out in red instead of being removed. They have added 4 seconds of invulnerability to the player when entering a cruise ship via the Arcwing Slingshot. They've also added 2 seconds of invulnerability when using context actions and the Omni tool. DE has disabled host migrations during Railjack level transitions to avoid putting the new host in a completely broken state. They've also disabled the ability to enter the Arcwing Slingshot while in a level transition for the same reason. They have improved the variety of Grineer fighters across the Proxima regions, with the lower level nodes spawning basic fighter types and the more difficult nodes slowly introducing elite units. Quick meleeing with the Omni tool in hand will no longer unequip the Omni tool. Railjack's armament stats will now show below the description of the item, and when viewing an unequip armament, it will now show 2 tabs for comparison's sake. You can now scrap wreckage on any screen that will allow it. Hijacked enemy cruise ships will now take on the health and armor values of the player's Railjack. The forward artillery will now fire on release instead of auto-firing after the charge is complete, but it will fire after 3 seconds of being held. They have improved the wing cam when using the tactical map. They've increased the Railjack's energy tube material, changed the material tinting across the Railjack skins, improved the cruise ship meltdown effect so that it is more obvious from the exterior. Avionics that are not compatible with the selected grid slot will be auto-listed at the bottom and appear grayed out to avoid confusion as to why it cannot be equipped. Lastly, armaments or components that are equipped in the selected slot are now marked as equipped, with armaments or components equipped in other slots still being marked as equipped on X. For controller and mouse use with Railjacks, DE added 2 new pilot control options that will be under the options, controls, and Railjack headings. The 2 options will appear as pilot-centered crosshair mouse for mouse and keyboard, and pilot-centered crosshair controllers for, of course, controllers. The controller setting will make it so your left thumbstick moves the Railjack and the right thumbstick will move the reticle. They also increase the smooth time for non-centered reticles while piloting and using the turrets in the Railjack. As for the Railjack controller use fixes, they follow. They fixed missing bumper functionality when cycling through components and armament categories in the Configure Railjack panel when using a controller. They fixed both the on and off state of the Railjack ability menu not getting bound to the custom ability menu keybind when using a controller. An issue where rebinding the ability menu in the Railjack tab controller options would allow you to open it with a new binding, but force you to use the default binding to close it. Now rebinding the ability menu will use the new binding to open and close it. They fixed customizing your Railjack controller controls, always showing them as their default button regardless of the changes. They fixed vector maneuver and the drift maneuver not functioning as intended, with you only boosting when using a controller. They fixed an issue where performing a dodge while piloting the Railjack would only ever cause you to lunge downwards. They fixed seeing secondary fire when piloting the Railjack after selecting the controller icon set as auto detect with a PlayStation controller. They've fixed blink not working with controller users who have never customized their controls. They've fixed custom Railjack controller bindings not applying to hijacked cruise ship turrets. The ability to endlessly descend the Railjack by holding down the controller bumpers while piloting. They fixed search and show ranked being bound to the same button when using a controller, which caused priority issues on selecting in the avionics screen. They also fixed an issue where move up and move down could not be rebound in the Railjack controller options, an excessive rise and fall sound triggering when piloting the Railjack, and a script error when equipping armaments onto your Railjack when using a controller. DE have reduced the brightness on the dome charge effect. Lastly, there were Railjack changes. DE have added battle and tactical avionic categories to the avionic upgrade screen. Boarding cruise ships will be denied when the meltdown timer has 3 seconds remaining, with DE noting that this is to avoid multiple ships being put into a broken state due to the boarding cinematic completing with a cruise ship exploding or attempting to teleport you out. They have removed the hangar door of the Grenier Point of Interest Steal the Destroyer objective to resolve issues of the door not opening. Upon returning to the Railjack after exiting through the Arcwing cannon, players will now be spawned at the back of the Railjack bridge instead of near the forging bay. Lastly, enemies that are focused on you while in a turret will now display their status effect stacks. DE made the hit notification sounds clearer when making contact with an enemy fighter. They also fixed the UI becoming unresponsive if the View Mission Progress screen was open while transitioning to another Railjack level or dry dock. Railjack Revisited. This video is specifically covering the Railjack Revisited changes, fixes, and additions, so without further ado, let's get into it by prefacing the information with the DE comments. They said, "We are continuing our Warframe Revised update pattern, this time with a focus on Railjack. Earlier this year we released Warframe Revised, which touched a lot on Warframe, but also included a big batch of bug fixes for Railjack. Now it's time to dive deeper into key areas, those being pacing, balance, and tools of the trade. Not included in this revisit are intrinsics, missions, and other areas. These are bigger undertakings for later parts, but expect more revisions to come. In part 1, we are revising pacing, balance, and tools, because these three make up the foundation of all Railjack gameplay. What's the pace of Railjack missions? How hard are you hitting enemies, and vice versa? What are the tools for the trade? This update provides new answers to all of these questions in a new foundation to Railjack you've known since launch. The key intention behind this Railjack Revisited update is to make Railjack better paced and more fun, while also being more rewarded for your time. You may notice some items listed below are striked through. Over the weekend we posted a developer workshop of these changes and also ran our first ever public test cluster, where Tenno could playtest these Railjack changes before they went live. As we reiterated on the feedback gathered, we wanted to show this in our update notes. If we iterated on a change following feedback, we have listed the original planned change with a strike through for the sake of comparison. The notes that follow are the dev implementation of that feedback, which are now live. Whether you participated in the public test cluster or shared your thoughts on the developer workshop, thank you again for providing thoughtful feedback on these changes prior to the release. So let's get to the general changes for Railjack first. DE has doubled the Railjack's innate loot pickup range, this being the vacuum. They had also added, "We've also improved the way the vacuums pull items towards the player and the Railjack. The maximum amount of time it takes for the pickup to reach the player should be a little more consistent now, about 0.75 seconds in most cases." The sentient anomaly in the Veil Proxima now has no downtime. It rotates every 30 minutes to a different node with no downtime in between. They're changing the pacing and general feel of the Railjack piloting and movement to be less reliant on the optimal strategy of single strafe, boost, then repeat. So what they've done is double the Railjack's base speed, lowered the boost speed by 75%, increased the boost speed cost of dodge, and increased the boost drain. Moving on, they made scale a factor in damage reduction and bonuses. They've stated this means Archwings and their weapons will do more damage to ships while also taking less damage from them. They've fixed inconsistencies with the sensitivities of the emplacement positions, so side turrets now match the pilot turret. They've doubled the Revelite crafting yield from 50 to 100, tripled values of titanium and asterite resource drops. Grineer on foot enemies now drop Archwing mods, and captains drop operation and dual stat Archwing mods. They've added an Omni tool binding when using a controller, with the default binding being RB plus the right directional pad button. To customize this, you can go into your options, controls, customize controller ability menu, and then in the bind section, equip Omni. They've also stated the Omni tool will only be equipped using this shortcut option if it is in the gear wheel. The Omni tool will now slot into the first available slot in the gear wheel when they are given to players instead of being appended to the end. They've removed an unnecessary ability to use the Omni tool outside of Railjack missions. Railjack sessions now lock after 5 minutes or if 50% of the fighters have died, similar to the normal missions. They have removed the whirly spin move of one of the sentient fighters. They've updated the looks of the Tactus Grineer fighter ships, made slight visual updates to the search bar in the avionics screen. When transitioning between Railjack missions, your Warframe, your operator health and shields will be restored, as well as any Vazarin instant revives. Lastly, for the general changes to Railjack missions now reward more credits at the end of mission to tie some of the main currencies into the reward structure more heavily. So, Earth Proxima missions will now reward 30,000 to 45,000 credits depending on the node. The Saturn Proxima missions will reward 50,000 to 75,000 credits, and the Veil Proxima missions will reward 80,000 to 150,000 credits depending, of course, on the node. Moving on, we have the ship combat changes. Now, I should have stated this earlier in the video, but since I have not progressed in the slightest in Railjack, and because I don't play it, I don't have much of the footage for these changes up on your screen, so it's mostly just going to be the usual stuff with the information from the patch notes up on your screen rather than a showcase in-game, and I do apologize for that, but that's the way it is. So the ship combat changes. They've changed all health, shield, and armor to use the new Tenno versions introduced in Warframe Revised. They've halved the health and armor of all Grineer fighters, randomized the amount of fighters required to be killed during the extermination portion of the skirmish mission so that it is not always the same. They have decreased the amount of time between landing the killing shot to enemy explosions on fighters to 0.1 to 1 second, down from 1 to 3 seconds. And they stated the effect of this will be not only a quicker pace, but also a quicker time to spawn any drops. Shield recharge delay has remained at 5 seconds after public test server results, but previously they were going to change it down to 3 seconds from 5. But shield recharge delay remains at 5 seconds. They've changed the heat build-up for Railjack weapons. So, the APOC, under the Sigma, Levan, Vidar houses, their heat build-up has been reduced to 12 from 20, but for the Zetki house, it's gone from 40 to 20. The Karkanoks for the Sigma, Levan, and Vidar variants, their heat build-up has been reduced from 10 to 8. The Zetki variant has gone from 20 to 12. The Cryophon for the Zetki variant has gone from 400 to 350. The Photor under Sigma, Levan, and Vidar, that heat build-up has been reduced from 10 to 8, and the Zetki has gone from 20 to 12. As for the specific Railjack weapon changes, the Malati multi-missile, the reload speed for that has been decreased from 5 seconds to 2 seconds, and the projectile speed has been increased from 250 to 400. The Pulsar's damage has been increased, so for the Sigma, Levan, and Vidar houses, Mark 0 has gone from 43 to 52, Mark 1 78 to 94, Mark 2 133 to 160, and the Mark 3 213 to 256. For the Zetki house of the Pulsar, the Mark 1 has gone from 117 to 141, Mark 2 200 to 240, and Mark 3 has gone from 320 to 384. They've also made on-foot combat changes, but there were only 2 of them. They've reduced the health of all on-foot Grineer Railjack enemies by half, and they removed the scaled damage controllers from all on-foot Grineer Railjack enemies. Under pacing changes for Railjack. They've added caps for the amount of simultaneous Railjack hazards, of course those being fire, electric, and breaches, so your Railjack can now only have one of each hazard active at a time. They have made each Railjack hazard type even more harmful to the Railjack based on public test server results. They've reduced Railjack speed and damage when the Railjack is in the catastrophic failure mode. They've increased the amount of Omni Revelite required to remove hazard events, but increased the XP gained. They've increased the number of fighters in all alert stages. Enemies now spawn much closer to the Railjack versus 1,000 plus kilometers away. Destroying all engines on a cruise ship will now disable weapons, and destroying all engines on a cruise ship will kill half the crew on board. Under Arcwing changes and fixes. Long-standing issues with the usability of Arcwing Melee has been fixed, where they made numerous changes based on public test server results, including further melee weapon rebalancing. They've increased the base melee magnetism range from 100 meters to 140, decreased the chance of enemy fighters performing a maneuver to break away from melee attacks from 100% down to 10%. They've increased the camera offset from enemy fighters from 25 to 30 meters to help show action. Arcwing melee range mods will now affect the aim assist lock-on range. Arc gun stats have been normalized, and space combat now uses the ground's heavy weapon stats. They've also stated the UI lead indicator has been added to relevant Arcwing guns. For systemic changes to Railjack, the Kuva Lich Valence Fusion has been added for armaments and components under Railjack Valence Fusion. Players can now fuse duplicate built or unbuilt stats to their favorite built parts, boosting them. They've stated based on public test cluster feedback, this no longer requires built armaments and components to Valence fuse. Wreckage can be used with a resource cost of maximum 40%, with built armaments and components also being used and consumed with a Dirac cost. This system will require Dirac to perform if Valence Fusion occurs for built armaments and components. It will require resources and credits if the Valence Fusion occurs for the wreckage versions of armaments and components. Using this system, combining matching tiers gives 10% boost in stats, combining lower tiers gives 5% boost in stats. 2 tiers removed, those being the Mark III with a Mark I, it's a 2% boost. They've also stated you can only Valence fuse the same house and type of armaments and components across all marks, much like Kuva Lich weapons. And Sigma equipment, that being the stuff you start with or purchase from the dojo, cannot be upgraded with Railjack Valence Fusion. For affinity and intrinsic gain changes, they said they weren't touching on intrinsics here, but they have doubled the affinity to intrinsic point conversion, and you will now gain intrinsics 2 times faster. They also increased the earned affinity on killing elite fighters and outriders. Looking at the raw audio, this is going to be a long video with the fixes once it's added in here, but let's get to the avionic changes. DE have stated, when it comes to avionic changes, there's an overarching goal: simplify avionic management. Each integrated avionic type will now only exist with a single manufacturer rather than 3 manufacturer flavors. What this means is there won't be 3-time variants of the same avionic. So consolidated avionics have had their avionic capacity drain altered so that on average the integrated avionics now consume 20% less. This apparently ensures players can more comfortably fit the builds they want in the new consolidated system based on feedback from the public test cluster. The retired integrated avionics will be removed from the player's inventory when they log in via a script. The remaining integrated avionics for each type will take on the values of the previously highest valued avionic of its type. All Dirac used to upgrade integrated avionics will be refunded, and this applies to both the retired and remaining avionics. And all remaining integrated avionics will have their upgrades drained. They also added an incomplete tab and category to the avionics screen in the Configure Railjack panel, in the mod segment screen, and the codex. They've stated that avionics, mods, and arcanes that are not owned are marked as preview in the category, and those that you do own that are not at the maximum rank are also in the category. Lastly, you can now chat link avionics. Now we go to the Battle Avionic Refresh, Munitions Vortex. Apparently it stayed as it was prior to the update based on test server results. For countermeasures, the initial cost of it is now 5 flux energy, and the cost gets doubled if used again within 4 seconds up to a cap of 40 energy. So it goes 5, 10, 20, and then 40. Blackout Pulse. The display range stat appears on all marked targets while the projectile is in flight, and they've increased the radius from 100 to 200. They've also increased the damage from 250 to 500. For particle ram, it now requires forward velocity to be active, and they have increased the speed of the projectile when it's launched. They've also increased the length of the projectile so targets stay within the damage field. It gets 50% more damage during a vector maneuver and 100% more damage when launching the particle ram. It also now accepts energy color. For shatter burst, the display range stat appears on all marked targets while projectiles are in flight, and the range has been increased from 120 to 200, damage has been increased from 500 to 1000, radius has been increased from 60 to 80, and the fall off has been decreased from 100% to 50%. For Void Hole, they've decreased the duration from 25 to 12 seconds, and they have increased the attraction strength. For Fiery Phoenix, they only decrease the energy drain from 5 to 2.5 per second. Lastly, there is Seeker Volley, where they increase the damage from 1000 to 1600, increase the critical chance from 20% to 40%, and increase the speed from 120 to 260. For the tactical avionics, there was only fire suppression, and they said, change the fire suppression tactical avionics to always fix only one hazard, and upgrading the rank reduces the cooldown. Adding, previously the only reason you would have upgraded this avionic was to handle more hazards at once, but now your Railjack can only have one hazard at a time. Reducing the cooldown instead still gives you a reason to rank it up. New avionics have also been added to the Earth, Saturn, and Vale Proxima Grineer fighters, apparently to enhance your Railjack, with the about to be read values being the max rank, avionic, and grid rank. So Deep Hold is Levan. It increases forge capacity by 60%. Cruising speed is Zetki. Increases speed by 80% when no enemies are within 3000 meters. Quick Lock is Levan. Decreases ordnance lock-on time by 75%. Artillery Cheap Shot is for Zetki. Forward artillery has a 50% chance to not consume dome charges. Ordnance Cheap Shot is for Levan. Ordnance weapons have a 50% chance to not consume munitions. Lastly, Turret Velocity is Vidar and increases turret range by 25.3% with increased turret projectile speed by 55%. As we do get very close to the fixes for Railjack Revisited in update 27.4, we have a stat refresh for Arcwing melee weapons. So in the Mastery rank 0 to 3 category, the Veritux's damage has been increased from 300 to 470. The Onyx now has a Mastery rank restriction of 1, and the damage of the weapon has been increased from 290 to 412. The Yakuza has gone from Mastery rank 0 to Mastery rank 3, with damage increased from 350 to 436, and the status chance increased from 10% to 15%. Under Mastery rank 4 to 6, the Kazas has gone from Mastery rank 0 to Mastery rank 4 restriction, damage has been increased from 325 to 392, status chance has gone from 15% to 20%, and critical chance has gone from 10% to 15%. The Wrathbone has gone from Mastery rank 0 to having a Mastery rank 6 rank restriction. Damage has been increased from 280 to 450, status chance is gone from 7.5% to 12%, and critical chance has been increased from 15% to 20%. Lastly, there is the Mastery rank 7 to 9 category for Arcwing melee weapons. The Nux now has a Mastery restriction of 7, damage has been increased from 325 to 445, and the critical chance has been increased from 10% to 13%. The Centaur, it is now Mastery rank locked at Mastery rank 8, and the damage has been increased from 280 to 376. Lastly is the Prisma Veritux. It is now a Mastery rank 8 weapon, and the damage has been increased from 300 to 394, with the critical chance being increased from 15% to 30%. And this is the last section before fixes, Arc Gun changes. The Grattler. Proximity Fuse has been added to Grattler rounds in space so they explode when they are near a target. The Phaedra's accuracy has been increased. The Imperator Vandal's accuracy has been increased. The Dual Decurion's recoil has been reduced for use in space. They've increased accuracy and decreased the zoom field of view. The Larkspur has reduced the collision size of its alternate fire projectile. For the Velocitus, they've increased the size of the Velocitus projectile in space. Quick shot damage has been increased from 200 magnetic to 150 impact, 150 puncture, 150 slash, and 150 magnetic. Quick shot critical chance has gone from 25 to 30%. Charge shot damage has been increased from 1200 magnetic to 400 impact, 400 puncture, 400 slash, and 400 magnetic, with the charge shot critical chance increasing from 30 to 60 and the critical damage increasing from 3 to 3.6 times. The Corvus, the minimum fall-off range, has been increased from 175 to 440, and the charge shot critical damage has been increased from 2.6 to 3 times. Lastly, the Kuva ammo regen delay has been increased from 1 second to 0.7 seconds, ammo regen rate has increased from 10 to 66, and the fall-off for minimum damage has been increased from 120 to 137. For the Grattler, they removed the self-damage for the weapon in space, and that it now has the self-stagger mechanic while in space. Moving on to the Railjack changes. In point 1, DE quadrupled the XP gain from removing Railjack hazards. Fire, electricity, and ice hazards plus hull breach now offer 2,400 up from 600. For hull ruptures, it went from 1,000 to 4,000 with this hotfix. DE also changed confirmation text when valence fusing Railjack components just to be clearer, so it now reads choose a stat instead of the previous choose which stat to fuse. In point 2, your pet companions will now teleport alongside you when transitioning between different regions in a Railjack mission. They have stated that this addresses feedback that pet companions could take many seconds to catch up, or if it's bleeding out, won't catch up at all and then die. It also fixes pet companions sometimes dying on an exploding cruise ship that you had already departed from, and a lingering issue with the join warp feature not bringing your pet companion with you. In point 4, they changed the valence fusion pop-up if you have no compatible fusion items, but you do have wreckage partially funded. This pop-up will indicate that you cannot use partially funded wreckage for valence fusion, but you can get refunded for cancelling the repair and then use the valence fusion system. And then lastly, Void Mode will now be disabled when operators use a Railjack turret. A Join Any Crew option has been added to the game to search for open squads in active Railjack missions that you can join in a given Proxima region, and if there are no open squads, a pop-up will prompt you to try again or launch a new session from your Railjack. A Scrap Wreckage button has been added to the Railjack components and armament screen that removes the step of having to manually go into your inventory in order to view a complete list of wreckage to scrap when over the wreckage limit. And lastly, in regards to Railjack changes, fire hazards that spawn on the Railjack will now damage the ship and hull directly instead of getting split between the hull and shields. This means that even if you have full shields, you'll start taking damage directly to your Railjack if you leave a fire unattended. This update has changed the way Kuva Liches function and valence transfer. When a player ignores a Larveling, or if they execute one to get their own Lich, they will receive 100 Kuva upon mission completion. Larvelings, when downed, now present a weapon that they will roll with when converted to the Kuva Lich, and that showcase does appear above their head in the downed but not out state as shown on screen. Kuva Liches no longer kill you when you have the wrong Requiem combination, and to indicate that the Lich survives the encounter, it leaves the mission. Valence transfer is now Valence Fusion. Valence Fusion can improve the stat of your Kuva weapon even if the weapon you use to upgrade has lower stats. And the weapon you choose first will be the weapon that remains with the improved stats after the fusion. The example provided for clarity was the following. Your Kuva com with 25% damage can be fed into your 40% weapon to make it 44%. Your Kuva com with 40% damage can be fed into your 25% weapon to make it 44%, and your Kuva com with 25% damage can be fed into your 44% weapon to make it 48.4%. This change allows us, the players, to reach 60% on our Kuva weapons while clearing poorer rolls out of our inventory and just doing whatever. DE also stated they're looking at other places that could potentially use this mechanic, such as Railjack. They also shared that they are aware of questions about murmur hunting, but that is outside of the scope for this update, and they'll be reviewing it in the upcoming week. Now, DE increased the minimum time converted liches are in your mission 4 to 2 minutes, and they increased the damage converted liches deal per second with a damage bonus upgrade of 3 times. Plus, a fix was also made to converted liches not using their abilities. DE doubled the chance for a Lich to generate an ephemera to 20%. The powers on screen now displays your known Requiem and previous attempts. Kuva thralls should now all have a new marker. Kuva pickups and rewards are now displayed with a unique pickup notification. Kuva Liches can no longer be Parazon stabbed as they are escaping. DE cleaned up the visual metal chunks from the Lich's carapace ability. You can now search the Kuva Lich History Codex section by name, Kuva Weapon, and Ephemera. Kuva Weapon's innate bonus damage values now show when you are equipping the weapon in the arsenal. They have reverted the block on back-to-back Kuva weapons due to the addition of the Larveling preview. Players within your squad, including yourself, will now gain Murmur progress when someone in the squad fails a Parazon stab. They've added new effects to a successful Valence fusion. The Kuva Lich Codex page now has categories for your active, vanquished, converted, and traded Liches. Lastly, the chance for Kuva Lich nodes to spawn as exterminate missions has been lowered. Kuva Liches can now be affected by status effects, but to a cap of 4 stacks at a time per status effect, with the exception of Impact, which can be stacked a total of 6 times, but Impact has received a cooldown to avoid stun locking the Lich. Radiation will not convert the Lich for the duration against its faction, and instead, members of its faction will deal more damage to the Lich. You can now rewatch the Kuva Lich introduction cinematic via the Kuva Lich screen in the Codex. For optimizations were made to the Kuva Fortress tileset, which includes cleaning up wasteful materials, abusive lighting, volumetrics, overdrawn meshes, and much more. DE did provide the on-screen screenshot to show the before and after for these optimizations, so it is there for those that are curious. Now they also made micro-optimizations to a script used in survival missions. They improved performance of the Railjack cannons and when using the Imperator Vandal in Railjack. They optimized runtime lighting in the Earth Cave tileset, real-time lighting in the Jupiter Gas City Index tileset, and they optimized the Omni tool to fix a hitch when equipping it. They made a micro-optimization to a script used for controlling doors. Some micro-optimizations were made to the HUD performance, especially on the Railjack. Micro-optimization was made to UI performance, including while piloting the Railjack, to Railjack points of interest once sub-objectives have been completed, to a script that handles fire breaking out on a Railjack, to Chroma's effigy ability, and to a script used to animate the Dorcamos. For optimizations, they rewrote how navigation caches the active session counts to reduce latency and reduce server load. They optimized the Kuva Brahma cluster bombs with and without Mirage's Hall of Mirrors to address issues with crashing due to an effect overload. They optimized the Hillside Ruin Cave in the Plains of Eidolon, and they also added that in some cases this will result in an increase in performance by as much as 100 FPS. They also made systemic micro-optimizations to the UI system, most importantly, the HUD. They also improved the robustness of the script system by adding native resource tracking to the auto-generated bindings, made a micro-optimization when opening the navigation console, and they fixed an ancient bug on dual-core systems that could cause certain gameplay scripts to crash. For optimizations, DE heavily optimized survival missions and replaced the old script with a new one. They also optimized the performance of Karkanox and APOC armaments to improve performance, how custom shadow quality settings are applied, the Kuva Nukor's effects, lighting across many dojo rooms, enemy awareness code, the way the codex is stored to save nearly 3.5 megabytes of memory, the way the star chart is stored to save nearly 2 megabytes of memory, language cache pre-processing, Hydron on Sedna, Hildren's Aegis Storm, and the effects on Titania's Lantern ability to improve performance, and they optimized the Silver Grove Shrine by reducing the number of particles. They also made optimizations to the Kuva Fortress tileset, a micro-optimization to the resource management system, and they cleaned up generic explosions by replacing certain effects that were causing performance issues. Lastly, they fixed a memory leak in dojos that could result in a crash after entering a large number of rooms, and they fixed random zombie players and optimized performance in relays in general. DE made optimizations towards improving the launcher's handling of third-party software interfering with content updates. They fixed a crash that would occur in the Silver Grove tiles on Earth if you had particle effect quality on some low settings. They fixed a crash on startup, particularly affecting systems with AMD GPUs. They improved error handling when running out of memory during the launcher cache optimization, and they removed a dozen unnecessary scripts from Necros's cloth. Now the following optimizations were made with this update. Further performance improvements came towards Titania's Lantern when cast on a large group of enemies. They improved the cache optimization to clean up even more space in the download cache. They improved world state synchronization for alerts, sorties, and other global events. They optimized backdrop rendering performance in all levels. They fixed codex generation, randomizing the block order of the fragment entries. And they improved the game synchronization in hostile network environments. Now we have the controller fixes, DE fix being unable to restore default controller bindings on PC, an inability to activate Railjack abilities bound to the same button as move up, context actions sometimes not displaying the correct key to use them on a controller, non-functional controller callouts when upgrading avionics and attempting to filter the type, the controller callouts for toggle interior and randomize all in the Railjack customized menu not functioning properly, the chat window scroll bar moving after each mission. They fixed 2 callouts for the same button, sort and break down in the Arcane Manager screen, and they fixed the rank up button not appearing outside of the Arcane Equip screen when opened via the Foundry. For optimizations, they optimized out a number of small memory bloats in the type depth database to reduce the risk of crashes due to relocation. They fixed high GPU effects times when shooting the Prophet Taker's legs with the Imperator Vandal, and a crash that could occur on slow internet connections if you quit the game while loading into a relay. For optimizations, the Pox, Esteltra, and Shadow have been given explosion effect tweaks for visual and performance improvement, and at the moment, as far as I'm aware, the Esteltra does not have explosion effects, which seems to be a bug. They also optimized the Attica's embedded projectiles to help CPU and GPU performance. They optimized the Hystrix's projectile trail and spark effects. They removed the replication of the Basmu reload health effect so that only the user will see the effects to aid in performance. And they made performance improvements towards Grineer cruise ships when their engines explode. Now, under optimizations, they vastly improved the responsiveness of the launcher when shutting it down during a network failure, and they fixed the game possibly having high memory usage if someone was spawning the Spore Ephemera in the other room, and the game wasn't properly cleaning it up due to them being out of sight. For optimizations, they made small optimizations towards lighting and shadows on low-end machines when deferred rendering is enabled. For optimizations, DE fixed regression in network bandwidth throttling, which was introduced last week that could cause access lag and inconsistent game states for clients. They also optimized network connectivity for towns, dojos, relays, and Scarlet Spear kill codes. They optimized shader upload particularly when not using deferred rendering, orbiter performance slightly, and they optimized network connections to relays, towns, dojos for people around the world. They also said, not only will this improve player movement, but it should also help accelerate kill code transmission for Scarlet Spear Murex raids that would have previously had a very high ping to our servers. For optimizations, before we get to the fixes, DE made a micro optimization to the Caribus heat beam effects, and they attempted to further improve their script error diagnostics to better expose problems with errors caused by joining hosts under hostile network connections. For optimizations, DE optimized shader upload particularly when not using deferred rendering. They optimized load times and memory footprint for the orbiter, relays, towns, and dojos. They made numerous improvements to diagnostics submitted when the game crashes, particularly for crashes coming from graphics drivers. Optimizations were made to the Grineer Settlement, Corpus Ice Planet, Orican Moon, Grineer Galleon, Grineer Shipyard, and the Grineer Fortress tile sets. They cleaned up effects to improve performance with the Detron and Mara Detron, and they also tweaked their projectile lifetime to 3 to 5 seconds. They continued performance improvements towards Mirage's Hall of Mirror clones when using a multi-shot weapon. They improved a hitch that would occur when opening the in-game market, and now a spinner icon will appear when loading. They fixed a large game hitch that could last up to 10 seconds when replacing a dragon key in the gear wheel with a K-Drive launcher. They fixed a long game hitch when equipping the Legacy theme and opening the star chart. They made optimizations to the sound thread which might improve performance on low-end machines. And lastly, they improved screen space reflections to sit better with the cube map reflections with deferred rendering enabled. For optimizations, there were 2, which came in 0.4, where they hardened the content update system against third-party proxies with corrupt or stale data, and they fixed content updates stopping abruptly when encountering any network problem. For optimizations, DE fixed content update stopping abruptly when encountering certain types of network problems, and a crash that could occur during certain types of a network problem, and they made a micro-optimization to K-Drive races. Under optimizations, DE improved the robustness of the launcher in the face of hostile networks and fixed an issue with certain particle effects when running the game at very high frame rates. DE made systemic micro-optimizations to the smart callback library and hardened it against hardware bugs on vintage CPUs. They optimized the excavation HUD initialization to try to eliminate delays where race condition bugs can sneak in, and they made numerous micro-optimizations to the string handling code. DE made some micro-optimizations to several UI panels. They optimized cruise ship explosions in Railjack missions as they were causing a noticeable impact on performance. Made some micro-optimizations to runtime object creation, some systemic micro-optimizations to type serialization, and they optimized level loading slightly, as well as fixed Railjack spot loading the first time it's brought into view in the orbiter. For optimizations, DE made some micro-optimizations to rendering performance, some micro-optimizations to Nidus's maggots, to some UI screens and systems. They optimized the UI text rendering, a number of micro-optimizations to the UI and effects rendering, micro-optimizations for dual-core systems with simultaneous multi-threading, several micro-optimizations to flash rendering, some micro-optimizations to rope physics, systemic micro-optimizations to the script runtime. They optimized level load times and made some systemic micro-optimizations to the script runtime. Now for optimizations, DE added a workaround for content update on properly configured computers, improved content update support for local proxy servers on Windows 8.1 and 10, and they optimized out hitches in item preview when a customized Warframe skin is already equipped. With that said, we go to the optimizations of the update. DE optimized terrain rendering, the initial download size by 100 megabytes, geometry on the Cambion drift to improve frame rate, rendering slightly when bloom is disabled. They also improved detection of runtime errors in the script system, made systemic micro-optimizations to all code on Windows and Xbox One, made a micro-optimization to splash effects on the water surface, a systemic micro-optimization to the memory allocator, a micro-optimization to the physics system, effects system, and script runtime. And lastly, they fixed CPU times increasing significantly when frequently switching between controller and keyboard. Optimizations, DE improved the frame rate consistency when using automatic VSync. Moving on from those changes, optimizations. They made systemic micro-optimizations to shader memory on PC and Xbox One, and they fixed a giant memory leak caused by disabling multi-threaded rendering. And for the changes, Bone Widow Necromex can now be found patrolling or in its deactivated state in the Cambion drift, similar to Void Rig Necromex.